All right, so yeah, we got a fun debate for you guys tonight. I'm really excited for this one. We will be debating whether or not LGBTQ plus should be represented in children's media. So why don't we bring on our debaters? First up is the owner of liberalforum.org. If you haven't heard of it, go check it out. He also debates right-wing positions on behalf of Politically Provoked. We don't necessarily condone or agree with his positions, but feel it's important to have representation of the far right, far left, and everywhere in between. So let's bring on Andrew Wilson, aka Big Papa Fascist. How are you?
Good.
You want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum and where people can find you?
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson, also known as BigPapaFascist. Probably fairly staunchly paleo-conservative. I took on the name BigPapaFascist mostly because that's what the left calls everybody who's on the right is a fascist. I argue right-wing positions on behalf of Politically Provoked, and tonight I'm here to kick Dylan Burns over the rail.
Okay. All right. So next up is somebody brand new to Politically Provoked. So I'm very excited to have Dylan Burns. How are you tonight?
I'm doing wonderful.
Yeah. So you want to introduce yourself, tell people where you lie on the political spectrum and where people can find you.
My name's Dylan Burns. Sadly for Big Papa Fascist, I'm wearing sneakers, so I have good footing, so it's gonna be hard to kick me over the rail. I'm pretty left wing. I work in democratic politics. I work for a political PAC called 21st Century Democrats. I'll soon, most likely, be getting on an LGBTQ plus rights organization on their board and on a few financial and policy committees. I was a foreign policy advisor to two Democratic campaigns, and I just generally work in Maryland politics. I'm also on my city's environmental board and managed successfully the mayor of College Park's mayoral campaign. He's also the first gay mayor in our city's history, and I'm very proud of that.
Nice. And where can people find you?
You can find me at twitch.tv/Hasanabi. I'm that really handsome duder.
And I do have both of their links in the description, so if you guys want to check them out, you can go check it out there. All right, so here is what we are going to do. Each person can give an opening statement, can be as little as 1 minute, no longer than 5, about the topic and your stance. After that, we'll open up the floor. After the debate is over, we'll go into the Q&A. If you guys have questions, tag Politically Provoked, who your question is addressed to. We should be able to get to them all. After the Q&A, we'll do closing statements and final thoughts. So why don't we get started with, oh, wait, one thing, let's limit the interruptions and no personal attacks, Andrew. So let's get started with opening statements. Dylan, why don't you get us started?
Sure. So one of the most respected figures in the history of children's media was a guy by the name of Mr. Rogers. He inspired a generation of children's content creators to educate children as well as entertain them. And he never shied away from difficult topics. When 9/11 happened, he came back to do a special episode about the tragedy of the 3,000 people who died. He also did segments on racism, discrimination, domestic abuse, how to go tell people about you being abused, divorce, and many other serious topics. Children's media has never shied away from these difficult topics because children, whether we like it or not, are introduced to these difficult topics many times, whether they like it or not, at a young age. And trying to talk to children responsibly about difficult topics is of extreme importance. We want children to know how to go talk to an adult if they're being abused. We want to give children some basic values on how to treat another fellow human being with respect. We want to make sure they treat their fellow human being with love. And I think when it comes to a modern generation of children's media, it's been quite garbage. It's brain rot. If you see how children consume YouTube content now, it's all flashing colors and symbols, or as they go through the YouTube algorithm of AI-generated content with no thought put into it whatsoever. It's actually disgusting and a lot of times predatory. And so what I would rather like is a return to the more rigid Mr. Rogers style children's content, where we talk about these issues in a responsible manner to children. And I think that should also include representation of many different people along the spectrum, because the thing about bigotry is its main fuel has always been ignorance and fear. And if we can dispel that in youth at an early age, then I think they'll be more willing to be accepting of other people. And that's a basic opening statement. I have a lot of like other stuff I want to bring up, but I don't want to hog up too much time at the beginning.
Thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you bring up Mr. Rogers. My understanding is that he told one of his coworkers to stay in the closet and marry a woman. But that aside, let me get to my opening statement here. Tonight, we're going to get into a serious societal plague that can't be easily addressed without addressing several problems at the same time. So stay with me as I'm going to tie them all together. And Dylan, if you want me to go back over any of these, you're welcome to ask about them. The Blues Clues LGBTQ episode is nothing but a typical symptom of a much larger societal problem. That problem is that we have given the lunatics the keys to the asylum. In order to address the scope of this problem, I need to tell the audience some very uncomfortable truths. You see, ladies and gentlemen, one second, I'm really sorry here. I got a flicker. Okay, sorry about that. A disturbing. Well, this sucks. Okay, sorry. Back where I need to be.
They're preying on you.
To start with, I'll agree with the left on one issue out of the gate. There are a lot of conservative grifters. There is no doubt that's true. One such grifter is right on Twitch, and his name's Rob Knorr. What makes him a grifter? He takes neocon talking points and debates them for money. I've asked Rob on many occasions to address the true societal problems we're currently facing, the issue of the alphabet soup mafia and the transgender paradox. He won't do it. Why? Because he knows his Twitch channel will be gone just like that. So he stays within the boundaries of what the left accepts as opposition. What a weakling. You're never going to debate partner with me, Rob, until you grow up and face the fact that there's more on the line than your Twitch channel. You see, ladies and gentlemen, these supposed conservative cucks are worse than the leftist cucks. It's through them this madness has been allowed to go on for as long as it has. Which brings me to my deep dive into Twitch, a disturbing place where no debate panel is allowed to exist without a homosexual or transgender being included in it. A place where gay sex can be openly talked about, but people can be banned for a name. A disgusting den of iniquity. The most interesting part of Twitch is all of the trans liars. You probably don't know about them, but you see, I've spent the last few weeks diving into the chats of these lunatics and listening to them or debating with them, as they are almost to a person grifters. Demon Mama, for instance, told me that they had cut their balls off live. Most likely a lie. Most, if not all, of the trans broadcasters on Twitch are likely frauds. They take your money for surgeries they never get and laugh at you. They aren't transitioning at all into anything. I did some calling around, and gender reassignment surgery, where the anatomy is actually manipulated via surgery of any kind, is extremely rare. Breast implants being the exception to this rule. Actual genitalia surgery doesn't happen much, and almost everybody who identifies as being transgender hasn't undergone one. Most of them are frauds. Ask the ones on Twitch who raised money to have one sometime. They'll go ballistic because they took the money and skipped the surgery. They are what I call trend sexuals, and you guys all funded them. Ask them for the receipt. You see, men can't orgasm if they had their balls cut off. That's why they don't do it. That's why they have such high testosterone in these debates. They aren't eunuchs. They just never did it. These transsexuals and charlatans are reading books to small children between the ages of 3 and 5 nationwide. Trans Charlatan Story Hour. The same trans individual who is doing these readings and pioneered them is also singing the song in the Blues Clues episode in question to the tune of a Civil War song called When Johnny Comes Marching Home. A Civil War song, interestingly enough, which is appropriate as that song itself was stolen, much like women's identities are being stolen by trans women. The broader implications of a society that is so disgusting it will glorify a man pretending to be a woman while that person sings about what a family is should send shudders down your spine. For 60 years, homosexuals laid the groundwork for societal acceptance and marriage equality. They got it. The organizations didn't go away, though. Instead, the infrastructure was co-opted by transgenders, many of whom are not homosexuals by any metric that can be logically explained. Dylan here, for instance, he's a homosexual. I agree this is true. There are simple criteria for this. He has sex with men. It's no more complex than that. Dylan has stated many times he doesn't believe homosexuals can change their sexual orientation. They can't help it. They are born that way, yet somehow he is able to embrace the paradox that men can be women. You see, if you claim that men can be women, as trans advocates do, then you have to accept that they are real women. If a gay man transitions to being a woman and you consider them a real woman and they sleep with men, then they aren't gay. They can't be. It would be a paradox if they were. So essentially, if by my estimation, gays have cured homosexuality. All a gay man has to do to not be a homosexual is claim they are a woman. Just like that, they are a woman and no longer gay. In Dylan's worldview, though, they are born gay and can't change that fact. And I want to know how he squares the two. I don't think he can. Yet he will advocate one of these clearly crazy people be allowed on the television in the face of all decency to preach to us what family is.
Wrapping up the opening.
I'm almost there.
Okay.
So I'm going to give this a hard pass, a complete and total hard pass. No LGBT on TV until you can show that they are all insane, poisoning our children with your absurdities. So Dylan, I want to ask you directly. Is there a cure for being a homosexual? I think there is. If you agree that trans women who sleep with men are real women and not gay, then there is a cure for homosexuality. Is that not correct?
Okay. Damn. Wow, man. I did not know. Damn, straight with the cigarettes. I'm opposed to like smoking on TV personally. I think it sets a bad influence. But first on the Mr. Rogers points, yes, there's people with many different beliefs who think good things and bad things. George Washington had a lot of cool beliefs about freedom. He also owned slaves. So, you know, I can trust a good belief and also say, like, if I'm saying, like, hey, I believe in liberty and freedom from George Washington. But then you say, you know, he owned slaves. Do you have to be pro-slavery now? No, I think that doesn't make sense. And you're right. No panel on Twitch, no successful one, can actually stream, and this is good, without a gay or LGBT guest. Why? Because I'm the host of the biggest politics panel on Twitch, and I'm gay. So by default, it has to have an LGBT person on there, because I'm always on there. Boom shakalaka, amazing logic. Number 3, when it comes to the no evidence of transition, this is actually really simple to deal with, because I helped one of them personally get the transition. Riley Grace Rochong, actually, I babysat their turtle as he went off to get their surgery, to deal with that stuff. We saw that happen. We saw the recovery process. That was all done in the public eye. That's very obvious to the public eye. You are somebody that I know, like, usually asks for receipts on stuff, for stuff that you have no evidence for, so you just ask for receipts. A great example would be your kerfluffle with Hunter Avalon, accusing him of being funded by big groups while having no receipts, and then you ask for receipts that don't exist, right? Because he's a grifter, and I assume receipts will just magically appear out of nowhere, but those receipts don't exist. So you can ask for receipts for medical surgeries. People who are taking this money, as far as I know, do go through with this. You're going to have to show me examples of this happening, and even if it did happen, that doesn't mean for cases like Riley Grace Rochong, what I'm actively talking about right now, that didn't happen, because we all saw that happen publicly. We saw the changes in someone's body, and I had to personally babysit their turtle. There's video footage of that little shit turtle in the background. I'm not a big fan of pets. Okay. And when it comes to, what was the next one? Oh, and just want to let to the public know that I'm personally going to be hosting a drag queen story hour in the near future in my community. Just wanted to throw that out there. Now, when it comes to organizations, LGBTQ plus organizations not magically going away, it's because there's still many issues when it comes to whether adoption or international problems. For example, Hungary just banned a so-called gay propaganda, what we're talking about right now, as a means to combat pedophilia, even though there's no evidence whatsoever that doing so would actually combat pedophilia. There's still work to be done, so why would you get rid of said organizations, whether it be on adoptions, whether it be on mental health care, whether it be on just general health care for LGBTQ plus people, whether it be combating conversion therapy, which is an unproven method of torture, whether it be combating politicians who are trying to get into office to push back the stuff that we've gained. And I do believe trans people are included in that community, and there's a lot of work to be done there. So I don't know why these organizations would magically disappear if there's still work to be done. That's like saying the NAACP should have faded into existence once Martin Luther King made his I Have a Dream speech. There's still work to be done in the black community. Why would they go away? I don't really believe in the Born That Way narrative. I think you just assumed I did. I believe it's a combination of nature and nurture. I don't really think scientists have really been able to properly quantify it. So I do think it's like it's like semi-born that way. I do believe I think, I can only guess that I was born that way. I don't think science has really completely discovered. There's a combination of hormones and maybe some nature. It's too, there isn't a scientific consensus on the matter, so I don't want to make any assertions.
During your breakdown of Pastor Anderson's anti-LGBTQ rants, you explained multiple times that one of the primary reasons it was wrong is because the homosexuals in question couldn't help it.
Yes.
Do you stand by that?
Yes. But that's
okay,
also,
well,
they can help that they're I can't, if something happens to me at 3, and I don't know what that could be, that impacts the nurture of my sexuality. That happens for all people, by the way. It impacts what fetishes people have, what sexual interests people have is also stuff that is nurtured. I can't control what happens to me at 3, unless you think maybe like I was gonna like put on like blockers and like go through society like going like vagina, like through the community, like looking for vaginas. Like I unless you thought I could do that at the age of 3, then I don't really think I had control of that. No.
Okay, so you do think that it's environmental then?
I think it's an environmental and nature. I think it's a combination. That seems to be what most scientists believe at the moment, but they haven't reached a complete consensus. Like one example would be hormones.
What do you think? Not what scientists think. What do you personally?
A combination of nature and nurture.
A combination of nature and nurture. So my question then stands one more time to you, Dylan. Do you believe that a transgender woman's a real woman?
Yes.
Okay, if you believe a transgender woman is a real woman, then if they engage in sex with a male, they would be engaging in heterosexual sex. Is that correct?
No, that would be yeah, that would be heterosexual sex. Yeah.
That would be heterosexual sex.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So then we can cure homosexuality by simply allowing a homosexual to become a woman. Is that correct?
This is the Iranian policy, and it hasn't had much success in the nation of Iran. They've tried this. In the nation of Iran, I somewhat specialize in foreign affairs in the Middle East. What happens is if you are found to be a homosexual, an option that's made available to you is, okay, you either get punished or you become a woman. Because there was like a religious debate within Iran, like, is technically this isn't against the religion, so I guess it's okay. And what happens is they do transition, some of them, and you want to know what? That isn't a good life they're living because they don't identify as a woman. If I was right now to just become a woman, I would feel very uncomfortable in my own body. I don't want boobs. I don't want a vagina. I don't want to identify as a woman. I don't feel comfortable using those pronouns. I strongly identify with being a man. The relationships I desire is between a man and another man, not a woman and another man.
Okay, so they would be cured though.
I mean, in the same way that shooting someone in the head cures them of cancer.
No, not in the same way.
Yeah, well, they no longer have cancer.
Okay, but they're no longer engaging in homosexual sex by your metric, right?
Yeah, and someone shot in the head no longer has cancer.
Yeah, I get it. I get the comparison you're drawing. It just doesn't make any sense. What I'm asking you,
thing makes no sense to me. So
well, it makes total sense.
No, it doesn't.
Homosexuality is the activity of two same-sex people engaging in sexual activity. I can give you every definition under the sun by every authority that you want that proves that that's true.
So if I cut off your dick, would that cure you of heterosexuality since you can't engage in heterosexual sex?
No.
Why not? But you no longer have a penis.
Because I would still have XY chromosomes. So if I engaged in sexual intercourse with a male, they would still be same sex.
So if I just banned you from having sex, would that cure you of it? Like if I just put you in a room, locked you up, would that cure you of that?
I don't know, but by the metric that you're talking about, you're saying they're no longer homosexuals, they're heterosexuals, then they're engaging in heterosexual sex. That's your metric, not mine. My metric is to say that if you're a homosexual and you're engaged in homosexual sex, that you're a homosexual, regardless of what your gender identity is by definition.
Okay, but the thing is, I believe gender identity would impact of whether somebody that is hetero or homosexual sex.
Why?
Because they're a woman.
But by what metric? Is there any quantifiable metric you can give me that they're a woman, or is every definition for homosexual
they identify as a woman?
Okay, but every engagement for homosexual activity is defined as same sex. For instance, if you had two animals who were engaged in same sex, what would you call them? Would you call that homosexual behavior?
Yes.
Okay, you would call that homosexual behavior. But in human beings, if you're engaged in homosexual activity, you're saying it's not homosexual anymore. if you don't identify as being a
I
homosexual.
assume if the antelope somehow was able to identify as a woman antelope, but this isn't something we see as in animals. So, I mean, as far as we know of, because they don't have the same social characteristics as humans. Humans are much more complex than animals.
Yes, I understand humans are more complex than animals. This is why I'm getting into this with you, because it creates a paradox for your narrative. And it's very bothersome to me that this paradox exists within your narrative, that if you simply identify as something, you are that thing, regardless of what the meaning of that thing actually is. You will see in the private chat, there's a Merriam-Webster definition of homosexual. You'll also see that there's the APA definition of homosexual. You'll also see that there's the Oxford definition of homosexual. Every single one of those definitions of homosexual identify homosexual sex as being between same sex, not between anybody with any type of gender identity. It has nothing to do with identity. It's never had anything to do with identity, because there would be no way to measure it then. Identity doesn't mean anything. The social construction that is transgenderism is meaningless.
It definitely has meaning. It has meaning on people's lives. It has an impact on people's lives. There's medical procedures that a lot of times come with that. What do you mean it's meaningless? It's having an active impact on the world.
It's conceptual. So all you're
gender
talking about
gender is a concept. It doesn't mean but money is also a concept. There's an active impact.
Gender is conceptual. Gender is conceptual. Money, there's metrics for measurement. There's no measurement for gender.
Yeah, it's fluid.
Oh, right. So there's no measurement. The only way that you could measure gender would be qualitatively instead of quantitatively, correct?
Well, this would be like mental health issues, right? Like there's no way for me to be like, okay, here's the measure on the depression scale. Let's figure out, are you a 79 or are you a 2,
totally
right?
Agree.
But that means that doesn't mean depression is not like a real thing. It is something that scientists have been able to measure for a very long time. It has an active impact. This is something that is a reality in our world. Same thing with gender identification and gender dysphoria.
But they've only been able to measure it qualitatively, right? So like it's really hard to say that guy's more of a psycho than this guy if they're both psychos. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean it would be pretty impossible for me to say that like I'm more of a man than you are. I mean,
right. It's pretty hard. It's a pretty hard measurement.
Dick measuring, maybe. I don't know.
We have very clear, concise definition of what homosexuals are. You know what a homosexual is. It's a person who's engaged in same-sex activity. Suddenly we've introduced identifiers into it. The identifier of gender, and suddenly these words no longer mean anything according to you, even though every definition that is available by any authority that you want identifies these particular criteria as being same-sex activity. And what we dive into when we get into gender is that you conflate sex and gender, and you spent years trying to deflate that in conservatives. I can completely disassociate both of these concepts. Gender is a social construction. If you say that these are real women, therefore they're no longer homosexuals, even though they're engaging in homosexual sex, you're running into a logical fallacy.
But I don't believe it's homosexual sex.
Well, whether you believe it or not, what's objectively real is that it is by every definable metric.
By every definable metric. Okay, so let's be very clear. I believe that if somebody identifies as a woman and I go and I have sex with them, that's not homosexual intercourse, right? That's not homosexual intercourse. And the reason why is they're a woman. Because I see them as a woman.
Well, that's nice.
They identify as a woman. They are a woman.
But what is their sex?
What is their sex?
Yeah.
So okay, so you basically are saying that their chromosomes determine whether it's homosexual or heterosexual. Not
just their chromosomes, but whether or not they produce small or large gametes. In women, that would be ova, and in men, that would be testes.
So are you saying that if I meet up with, let's say you met up with somebody, Big Papa Fascist. Let's say they're like, I love how you're going to develop lung cancer from smoking, man. I love how you call yourself Big Papa Fascist on the internet, right? And they're really into you, and they take you home and you slam it, man. Congratulations, man. I'm rooting you on. Then afterwards, you're like, God, I didn't feel their gametes or chromosomes. And then you realize that they had all the body parts, and it was an amazing experience. They're a transgender woman. Did you just engage in homosexual sex?
Yes. By definition.
That is so fucking ridiculous to me.
No, but okay. What do those definitions say? What do they say the definition of homosexual sex is? You'll see it in the private chat on the right-hand side. Can you tell me what can you read what they say?
Let's go look at your definitions.
My definitions. These are authoritative definitions by the American Psychological Association.
Okay, I get it. The definitions that you provided, okay? If I provided you a source, I would assume you would say your source, okay? I think you're being a little nitpicky there.
Okay, I'll concede that to you.
Okay. I have not used this. Where's the chat?
It's on the
You'll see
right.
private chat on the right-hand side of the screen.
On the chat, exit full. Oh, okay. I had to exit full
Can you
screen.
pull up the APA?
Okay, the
The
APA.
APA definition?
Sure. Let's go to APA. The American Psychological Association. Sexual
And what
attraction
is
between male of the same sex. Though the term can refer to homosexual orientation, both men and women, current practice distinguishing between gay men and lesbians and homosexuality itself is more commonly referred to as same sexual orientation or activity.
Same-sex activity by the American Psychological Association standard. The American Psychological Association standard is also the same standard that you would use to identify gender dysphoria as now being the standard that you would apply to transgender people rather than how it was classified before as a mental illness to even be transgender, correct?
Let me ask you a question quick. Because you've asked the majority of the questions here, right?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, you can cross-examine. I have no problem.
I've got one
with that.
question here. Let's say I agreed with you. Let's say that I dipped my big toe in the BigPapaFascist pool. Why would this change literally anything about whether I would want them to be represented in media if, according to this definition, that it was homosexual activity? Why would this change anything?
That's the smartest thing anybody on your side has ever asked thus far, right? It may not, except that we could at least begin by having the conversation from a set point of what's real. And so the whole problem that we have on this side of the aisle is that we don't consider what you consider to be a reality to be real. And it seems that we have the definitions in science on our side as to what reality is and isn't objectively, and you do not. So if we could start from a place of you saying that homosexuality is defined as two men having sex, we might be able to actually have a conversation, or two women, any same-sex couple. But by saying that if you put on a wig and some makeup, that suddenly it's no longer a classification for homosexual sex, we have a big problem because we can't agree on reality.
This almost feels like the last 30 minutes was irrelevant then. Because thing is, I don't agree with the definition. But if we want to work off of a common thing and say it is, since it literally has, or appears to, until you play your fucking trap card or whatever you have like sitting in your back pocket somewhere, right next to the pack of Marlboros or whatever, like is gonna pull it out and be like, haha, see, I've tricked you. So let's for a second just live in this reality, because I really wouldn't see how it would change it for a second.
Okay, so how are trans women real women then if they're engaged in same-sex activity?
Because they identify as women.
Okay, but you're working off.
And that's I'm working off of gender.
I thought you just said you were going to work off of my paradigm. And in my paradigm, you're agreeing that homosexual activity is same-sex activity.
So
you just said
it wasn't okay. So okay, got it. It didn't change it then. Okay, got it. So it wasn't okay. That wouldn't change my even if I accepted this, which I don't, but let's say I did for a moment, that wouldn't change.
Why would you accept what's real? That would be absurd.
I mean, you're the person making up conspiracy theories about Hunter Avalon being funded by Soros or whatever, right? So reality is not really conception.
I didn't say anything about Hunter Avalon being funded by George Soros.
Who's he funded then? Who's he funded? I want to know.
I don't care about Hunter Avalon.
I'm super curious. Because I was looking into you. I'm curious. I'm just
stop trying to change the subject and get back into what you're
I'm just curious.
Don't care. Get back to the subject.
Okay, man. Okay, whatever. So that wouldn't change the gender, and I still believe that they are women. They are women.
But they would be women who are engaged in same-sex activity. How would that make sense?
That's what yes, I agree that your thing makes no sense. I agree that your concept makes no sense.
You mean my objectively real concept that's actually true?
I love it when people, you know what? Every statement I'm going to make, I'm going to say, so this is the truth and the objective truth.
I provided evidence, real evidence that what I'm saying is completely true.
Your evidence was Merriam-Webster dictionary.
No, my evidence was the APA, wasn't it?
So another definition.
Let's try to be honest. Let's just try. Did you not read the APA definition for homosexuality?
I just read it on stream. Why are you even asking me?
Okay. So no, it's not Merriam-Webster
dictionary. Why are you so pompous?
Is it? Answer the question.
Why are you so pompous?
Because I don't like it when people lie to me.
Why don't you opened up with you're gonna do this, you're a fucking dirty lefty, and you fucking went up like why are you so just generally pompous, man?
Because I'm right, so it's easy to be pompous.
Right wing, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, right and right wing. So back to the subject at hand, we were discussing this issue within the paradigm of what's actually objectively real. Two same-sex people engaged in sexual activity would be homosexual action. So therefore, how could a person become a woman by your definition of gender and not still be engaged in same-sex activity by the American Psychological Association's definition of what that is?
So you would also accept that trans women are real women because that same organization does accept trans women as women, right?
Well, no, definitively they do not. They support that affirmations are very good for transgenders, but they don't support that they're objectively real women. No, they don't. That's not true.
Let's Google that right now, because I thought we were going to be talking about like statistics in children's media or stuff like that.
Well, we can't get. The problem is we can't get to anything unless we can agree on what's real.
Okay. Okay. Going to the API. I believe it's typically associated with who associate with the sex to which they assign a birth. Gender identity refers to a person's internal sense being male, female, or something else. Gender expression refers to the way a person communicates gender identity to others through behavior, clothing, hairstyles, voice, body characteristics. Trans is supposed to use a shorthand for transgender. Gender is generally a good term to use. Everyone's appearance or behavior.
Where does it say that they're real women, Dylan? Anywhere?
Why would it? I don't think it would say. By the way, everyone, they are real women.
Then why did you just say that it did?
Okay, the same way a dictionary would say women, totally real women. That's not how that's
well,
not
I know
how
what the
definitions
dictionary,
work.
I know what the dictionary would say.
That's not how that
I know
works.
what the dictionary would say because I provided you what the dictionary said. So back to where we're at. Are you gonna give me any evidence?
So far,
are you gonna give me any evidence that the authorities by which you abide, which would be the APA, consider these people real women?
I am so fucking confused right now. Okay, so right now what you've done is basically you've thrown a bunch of definitions in this way, that way, and this way, and then at the end of it said, see all these things I just defined? Does it make sense? Does it? I'm like, yeah, you're not making a lot of sense to me. That's the conclusion I'm taking away from this.
The conclusion that you're taking away is that you define that homosexual activity is not same-sex activity based on a person identifying that they're no longer that sex. That's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, I don't believe that homosexual activity, that if I have sex with a trans woman who has all the body parts of boobs, tits, the ass.
Well, what if they don't have all the body parts?
I don't think that would be it either. Because the thing is, if you think about like what it
So it is.
If you think about if you think about it, right? So like would like adding one body part make someone a man or make someone a woman? It doesn't really make sense.
Yes, you can add the body part called testes to make a person a man, just like that.
That's it? That's all it takes?
That's all it takes. Then you produce small gametes. If you produce
me
small gametes, you're a man.
That if Brittany over here in like 50 years from now, like there was some surgery that was done and that happened, then they would be a man now?
If they can produce small gametes, but they would not be able to. And the reason that they would not be able to is because human beings cannot asexually reproduce. She produces ova. So if she produced small gametes and large gametes, she could impregnate herself. So it's in the realm of impossibility, Dylan. You're holding your face like you don't understand these basic concepts that everybody on planet Earth actually understands. The only person who's trying to redefine the relationship of these concepts is people like you, not normal people like myself.
Normal people. Okay.
Yes.
You call yourself BigPapaFascist on the internet. You are the last person who can call themselves normal.
Yeah, I've explained why I call myself BigPapaFascist on the internet.
And if somebody said, well, you know what, everybody calls me a Nazi, so I'm just gonna call my Jew hater 69. I don't think that makes them very normal. No.
No, yeah, except if a black person uses the N-word, that would be just fine. If they say that the reason that they do is because everyone calls them that, you would probably embrace that just fine. You're full of shit.
No, I think that's
absolutely silly. You're absolutely full of shit. You know what the purpose is. You're diverting to the.
I really don't. I just thought you were
diverting to the. You're diverting to the. You're a fascist. You're a fascist because you can't seem to argue this logic.
No,
I can't argue this.
You said I wasn't normal. Then I said you call yourself a fascist, and now you're saying, "Wow, you call me a racist." You call yourself BigPapaFascist.
So what?
That's not normal.
Really, it's not normal to identify as something differently than most people identify as. That's interesting.
Do you? Do you think there's some scientific basis for that? Because there is scientific basis for like gender identity, and there's studies behind that. Is there any studies proving that like you're not a fascist or people call you a fascist a lot? Is there any studies or anything behind that?
I can't prove a negative.
Why are we not talking about children's media? I was ready for a good discussion of children's media,
and we can still
why don't we get
and
back
we can
into
still
that?
dive into children's media, but it's very important. And the reason
Oh
I
my
said
God.
that these concepts needed to be tied together is because what use is it to discuss what the impact on society of children's cartoons will be if we can't agree on what's fucking real? Can you answer that for me, Dylan?
I you know what? I will say right now. Okay, 1 second. Give me a moment because I'm trying to go through these APA stuff because I was ready for a discussion on children's media. I was not ready for a discussion on fucking if you can cure homosexuality through sex change operations. Okay.
These are things that you advocate for daily, and you're not ready to discuss them.
You know what? I'm ready for. Okay, let me ask you a question. You discuss all these things daily, right? Okay.
No,
You
I
don't.
don't.
You don't. You don't discuss
No.
politics daily.
no.
If I
I have a real job. I do real things. I'm the Omega Chad, man. I
the
do
Omega
real stuff
Chad?
all day. Yes. Real stuff.
you smoke,
Real things.
you're smoking on the internet. You're drinking alcohol on the internet.
And you openly talk about gay sex on the internet.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you end up with these
I don't know how you could
great
be.
moral
You're the mega
paradigms,
Chad.
Dylan.
You're the mega Chad going on the internet. Ha ha ha! I have debated and mega dominated on the internet. I am the real life mega Chad.
Uh-huh. And
I dude, it's not connecting.
I don't care. Get to the
About,
point.
about those children media.
Yeah, I would like to get to children's media. I was ready for children's media and the impact of
Not
like
ready,
psychological stuff.
not ready to
Oh my
defend the very
God.
ideas that you advocate
Well,
for.
let's- why don't we-
That's
why
fine.
don't
can
we
move
get
on.
back
Let's move
into
on
the
to
actual
children's
topic?
media.
Can we get to the actual topic? I would prefer that, Brittany, if we got to the actual topic.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you think that I should have say then, Dylan, in what type of children's cartoon that is aired, is broadcast? Do you think that I should have a say in that at all?
Sure. I mean, if you give a good reason, yeah.
Well, the good reason for the Blues Clues episode is that they receive large amounts of public funding from Congress, which means that
Okay.
I'm paying for these episodes,
No,
right?
no. I didn't mean like I meant like if you gave a good reason as to why.
That's a good reason, isn't it?
If you give a good reason to why something should change, like if we do this, it'll help children in this way, then I think it should change.
Okay, but wait, back up. Let's say that I can't give you any good reason at all. I just simply don't like the cartoon, and it's my money that's going to pay for it. Don't I still have a say?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
The same way, if anybody like pays taxes, I believe they should have a say in politics, right? But that doesn't mean if somebody's like, I pay taxes, so everybody should be nude all the time, means that position should take hold because that everybody else, well, I pay taxes and I disagree. So you should make the best argument, and whatever the best argument is for the best position should come out, right?
Well, then let's look at this objectively. As you have stated that you don't find the I was born this way homosexual thing to be valid, that instead there's massive environmental factors. Would one of those environmental factors possibly be the indoctrination through public access channels that I myself am paying for that may indoctrinate people into some type of homosexual lifestyle? Since you weren't very clear on what these environmental factors would be, I assume that could be one.
The science isn't
Okay,
really
so
clear,
that could be one then,
but
right?
I'm not going to regulate something if we don't have proper science on like this is going to make someone homosexual or this is not going to make somebody homosexual. We have no evidence that seeing a alligator hold a rainbow flag saying, "Hey, being gay is okay," is going to make more people gay. A lot of people will point to like, well, there's more people identifying openly as gay or bisexual now, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that people will be more open about the sexuality as they get more and more accepted. And
so then what environmental factors do you think persuade sexual choices when it comes to homosexuality
the
versus
science isn't clear.
heterosexuality?
What we do,
So
we
you
have,
don't
we
know.
do. Let me. You're correct. I do not know.
You don't know.
Nobody knows.
So because you don't know, it's equally as valid for me to say this likely could be one, right?
Well, it's the same way that we don't know what like is in the next universe way over there. That doesn't mean you saying like, I don't know, it's full of space aliens made of spaghetti. Like that doesn't make it equally valid because there's no evidence for it. You need to prove evidence before we like regulate something out of existence.
If you can't provide scientific evidence of what these environmental factors are, we're left with logic. You don't think it's logical for me to say that if you're advocating for homosexuality to 3 to 5 year olds, that may have an environmental impact on them?
Well, I'm not advocating for homosexuality. I'm advocating for the acceptance of people who are gay. As in, if you're gay, that's okay. Treat them with respect. Simple. I'm not saying, hey, every child, please turn gay, hurrah. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, hey, if you're gay, that's perfectly fine. You should accept people who are.
So you would be against any type of cartoons then that explore the idea that if you thought you were gay, that you should invest yourself in that.
If you, like, if a cartoon said, hey, if you're gay, if you don't know what your sexuality is,
to 3 to 5 year olds, would that be acceptable for you?
I guess depending on it, I would say anything that says at a young age, like, hey, if you somewhat feel this way, you are this. I would say that's probably bad. I think that's bad. Yes.
Okay, I see. And what about family units? When we're trying to discuss to 3 to 5 year olds what a family unit is, and they see on the public access television that I pay for that family units aren't a mommy and a daddy with children at home, even though within my paradigm that's the strongest form of the family unit. Do you think that maybe that might irk a person like me?
I mean, yeah, sure, a lot of things.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I mean,
probably.
But I don't think that's
so.
bad,
Then you can see the motivation behind people like me probably being upset about it and wanting it pulled from access television. Then, right?
I mean, I can understand why you're angry about it, but I don't agree with it. And here's some reasons. Okay. The first reason is there's many different types of families, and I think showing people and representing them in media helps a lot of people come to terms with a lot of the environments that they're in, and it helps them develop better. A great example of this would be the fact that when I was growing up, I didn't even think that, like, I could be gay. I didn't think that was a possibility. I didn't see it in media. That wasn't something that was talked to me by my family. I remember hearing terms from my father like, thank God my only son ain't gay, right? And not having that positive representation in media, like, this is okay, that is fine. I think if I would have had that at a younger age, it would have personally helped me develop. There was actually a recent, like, study that was literally just released, I think it was like yesterday or today, showing that in, like, schools that have LGBTQ plus inclusive, like, programs, not only does it positively impact the LGBTQ plus students on a mental health basis, it also does that for heterosexual students as well. And so when you build an environment that's inclusive and representative of people who exist in the world, it helps those people.
So you just said that the environmental factor of media helped you determine you were gay, just so you know.
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No,
that's literally what you just said.
I said it literally didn't help determine I was gay. I said it was not there for me. I had to find that out on my own. I said,
but if it was there for you, it would have helped you determine you were gay?
I think it would have helped me, yes.
Okay, got you. So there is an environmental factor
there's
associated
a difference.
with it,
Okay, the thing is, if I didn't know that I had long hair, but I obviously do, right? I have long hair. It's very obvious to everyone else, but I didn't know it. A cartoon saying, hey, if you have hair that's from not here, but here, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine that you might have long hair. That is different than him saying, you have long hair. You have long hair. That's
yeah, but
different.
we're talking, that's an objective reality, and we're talking about environmental factors leading to you being a homosexual or not being a homosexual. And it appears to me that you are advocating that you wish that there was more propaganda when you were growing up, because it would have helped you come to the conclusion you were a homosexual.
Yes,
isn't that
that's
correct?
Good.
Okay, so then we can establish then,
but that doesn't make them gay.
That children's cartoons targeted at 3 to 5 year olds may have an environmental impact on their sexual identity. Then can't we?
No. Okay. So the thing is, someone saying that it's okay to be gay doesn't make them gay. We have no evidence that's the case. What it could do is that they could be more accepting of homosexuals that they interact with in the future, which could help with their development, and definitely like high school, when over 90% of people going through high school who are LGBTQ plus have faced discrimination and bullying based off the fact that they are LGBTQ plus. That could help in that environment. And if they are gay, them seeing that, it's going to help them determine, like, oh, okay, that's perfectly fine if I am that. That's different from being like, hey guys, we're gonna play the special TV message that's gonna turn your kids gay with like flashing colors or whatever, the perfect combination to insert the homosexuality. There's no evidence for that.
Okay, so we're back to evidence again, scientific evidence.
Yeah,
and
evidence.
The scientific evidence that you have is to state that, hey, science can't prove what environmental factors actually attribute to you being gay. But when I talk about environmental factors that affirm me being gay, I think that that would be a good thing. It sure sounds like you're indicating that environmental factors like propaganda from the TV might influence a decision to engage in homosexual activity. Yes?
If I'm already gay, yes. Because the thing is, there's no evidence to provide that an alligator holding a rainbow flag is going to make somebody gay. What it could do, and there is evidence to there. I know, and I'm saying there's no evidence to suggest that, but there is evidence to suggest that having that positive representation, having LGBTQ plus inclusive programs at schools, having these things do have a positive impact on not only LGBTQ plus youth, but heterosexual youth as well when it comes to their mental health.
Okay,
and
but
so if we don't have any evidence, if we don't, come on, you've asked a lot of questions. If we don't have evidence for damage being done by this or it indoctrinating people into being gay, but we do have evidence for positive effects of this, then I would have to support it.
Well, we have evidence for what you consider positive effects for you. You haven't shown any evidence on how it's a positive effect for my side, who say that these environmental factors...
I can send you the studies if you want on how it does have a positive effect.
That these environmental factors, chiefly through children's cartoons or other areas like this, could possibly, because there's no scientific data on it, we have to use logic, but we know there's environmental factors, according to you, they could possibly influence children to sway towards an LGBTQ lifestyle, which also makes sense. As homosexuals don't replicate, so where do they come from, Dylan?
Nature and nurture. This is the thing.
That's right. That's right. They come from nature and nurture. So how much of it is nurture versus nature? We don't know. We
don't know. Yes.
Right. So, but we can assume that as the propaganda for LGBTQ has drastically increased, and yet homosexuals have also seemed to increase right alongside of it.
We can't assume that.
Well, we can kind of logically deduce, though correlation is not causation. I can certainly say that there's no gay gene because gays don't replicate. So where are they all coming from? They're coming from somewhere. They're coming from some environmental factor somewhere. And you're targeting these children at 3 to 5 years old with these cartoons. And I really need to know why in the holy shit you would ever think that we would be cool with that.
Okay, so the first thing is there's no logical evidence I don't think proves that, or any amount of logic would prove that, well, you see that there's more gays now statistically, and there's more trans people statistically, therefore it's because of these children's cartoons with rainbow flags and trans flags.
I didn't say that the correlation is direct.
Yeah, but you're saying logic could deduce that. The problem is, I think that a much more logical conclusion, if we're going off of this no evidence-based thing, would be that you're less likely to get lynched as a gay person now. There's less discriminatory policies in the United States. It's becoming more accepting, so your family might be more accepting overall. And I think this will continue to rise as it becomes more accepting. There's still states in the union where 50% of the population are against gay marriage.
I've heard this many times, that what's happening is that they were always just secret homosexuals, and now that society's more accepting, they're all coming out of the closet.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. The problem is that the accounting for it doesn't make any sense, Dylan, because homosexuals don't replicate. So there has to be some type of environmental factor that's causing this phenomenon, doesn't there?
No, because the thing is, if there could have always been homosexuals out there and they just come out of the woodwork.
There could have been, but there could not have been too.
So you're just talking hypotheticals, like, oh, we have no clue if the alligator with a rainbow flag saying don't bully gay kids is making kids gay because they're like, don't bully them. You mean suck dick? Like, I don't think that's happening.
But we can at least assume that if we're thinking about environmental factors causing homosexuality, that maybe the very first thing we would look to that seems to have such a high indication rate of how humans behave would be the media that they consume, specifically when they're children. And some of that media that they seem to be overly consuming right now happens to be LGBTQ-based propaganda at very young ages.
Really?
How much of it is environmental? I don't know. But my logical brain tells me that could be a contributing factor for sure.
Let's be clear. LGBTQ plus inclusion in media has really risen mostly, I would say, like in 18, 19, 20, 21. I would say more 19, 20, 21, because most media was very uncomfortable around the gay marriage ruling to include that in their media then. They were uncomfortable for a few years doing it because it was a divisive political issue, and companies' main goal is to make money. They don't want parents taking their kids out front of the television.
I thought you literally just said you had wished that we had the gay-friendly media environment when you were growing up, so it could have affirmed your gayness.
Right now. I'm talking about reality right now. I'm not talking about what I wanted. What I wanted was that inclusive environment when I was growing up. I'm talking about what was the real world, though. And the real world wasn't, hey, Dylan, if you're gay, it's okay. It was, I don't know, just Teen Titans, right? That's not what I was seeing. I'm talking about what we're actually experiencing, though. That was a very recent spike in actually representation. I believe the biggest spike was, I think it was like 71 instances. And I think it was like 2019 or 2020. And there's no large-scale jump or spike that couldn't be correlated from a general rise as it normalized in comparison. So that means that since it's continued to normalize, we've seen kind of this line going up like this. There wasn't no spike when we started seeing more and more gay characters in media. That didn't happen.
So let me ask you a decisive question. Since science can't rule what environmental factors make you gay, can you rule out that LGBTQ based cartoons are not a contributing factor? Can you actually do that or not?
I cannot rule that out. The same way I can't rule out.
And concede the debate.
You didn't.
Let him finish.
Can you rule out that I fucked your wife last night?
Yes, because I fucked my wife all night last night because I'm the alpha Chad.
You went to the bathroom, that little repressor, I went in there, boom, and got out. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Which actually makes me not gay, I guess. Who knows?
That's a terrible example, by the way.
You did cure me of my homosexuality. So, the thing is...
No, the transgenders have cured you of homosexuality. All you have to do is say you're a woman.
If we have no evidence to suggest something, and we say we can't rule it out, it's like Hitler in Argentina. Like, no evidence really suggests that Hitler's in Argentina. It's a conspiracy theory. But then you ask somebody, can you 100% rule it? I mean, I guess not. We never technically found the body. But it's like to the same extent. We have no evidence. There was no spike when we saw a huge rise in representation in media. It was the same rising trend as we saw acceptance going up. It doesn't really make logical sense.
One more time.
Can I finish?
Yeah, Andrew, you gotta let him finish.
I'll let you finish.
We saw no spike in homosexual like youth or transgender youth when we saw more representation in that media. We saw that didn't really happen, even if there was a spike, that could easily be explained by more people coming to terms with who they are, but that wasn't something we saw. It was the same general increasing trend as more people become accepting of being gay, transgender, etc., right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I don't think it logically follows that alligators saying gay is okay on TV, don't bully the gay kids, makes somebody gay. There's been no evidence to be provided. If I don't think there's no evidence, I don't think it makes logical sense, and there's no statistical stuff to back it up, and you say, well, can you 100% rule it out? Well, no, the same way you can 100% rule out I fucked your wife last night.
So let me ask you it a different way then. Would you be able to logically at least say that since we don't know what environmental factors are, that a person could logically conclude that one of those environmental factors may be the pushing at a very young age of pro-LGBTQ propaganda or not?
I don't think that logically follows, no.
No, you don't.
I don't think it logically follows that having like, hey, don't bully gay kids, gay people are accepted. And let's think about this representation that's in this media, by the way. A lot of people think it's like super uber aggressive. That it's
you don't think there could even be a small percentage?
Andrew, let him freaking
like, I just got to know. You don't even think that there could be a small, no matter how minute percentage?
I understand he's pretty right wing. He probably doesn't respect women's voices or women controlling anything in a conversation. I understand, but gotta assert.
Yeah.
So okay. So the thing is, I don't think. Is it possible that there's a maybe 0.2 percentage point? I don't think there is, but I mean, yes, it's possible. The same way science can 100% falsify anything. Science can 100% falsify that dinosaurs were faked by fucking Nazi scientists. Science doesn't. That's not how science works. We have to look at what is the most logical conclusion, backed up by statistical data and scientific data. There is no statistical data to suggest that the children's programming that has been LGBTQ plus friendly has has made more people turn gay. No statistical data to prove that. In fact, it has seemed to be an increasing trend of acceptance, and that seems to be the scientific consensus and statistical consensus at the moment. That's the first thing. Second thing, I don't think it logically follows telling people not to bully gay people, or it's okay to be accepting of gay people. I don't think that logically follows that would turn people gay. The same way that if I tell people not to bully somebody of this group or that group, they would become part of that group. This would, of course, apply to maybe like clubs of certain sort, like chess clubs. I don't know. And the last thing I would say is, if there's no evidence to back it up, I'm certainly not going to regulate it. I'm not going to start saying that this needs to be stopped. We need to stop giving funding to programs that are doing something. Definitely if it's having a positive impact, and that positive impact does have a statistical impact. We see that not only will this help gay kids and trans kids, this helps straight kids as well. I'm looking out for straight Billy Jim, whoever you're going to raise up. God forbid. They're going to be positive.
Well, one of us has to raise them up, Dylan. You're not going to have kids, right?
Hey, artificial insemination. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Science is amazing, ain't it?
So again, we're back to this, that Dylan would have loved to have been in a pro-LGBTQ environment because it would have helped him affirm that he was gay. However, logically, he can't conclude under any circumstances that LGBTQ cartoons that are targeted at young children could environmentally in some way contribute to them acting out as homosexuals and engaging in homosexual activity. Because I define a homosexual, and so does everybody else on planet Earth, as being somebody who engages in same-sex activity. That's it. If you don't think that these could contribute to helping a person make the choice to engage in homosexual activity, I just can't fathom that.
The thing is,
it doesn't make any sense.
Can you please explain to me how exactly it would do that? Because the thing is, for me, is when I look at the LGBTQ plus representation in media, it isn't like, hey, here's the gay couple, and they go up and they like finger bang each other on the kitchen table. It's like once a month, the corporations come out and they're like, their character's gay. Then everybody
What do you
claps.
mean once a month?
That's what happens. That's what happens.
It's not a once a month
Pride
thing.
Month. Pride Month is when it happens the most.
It's the trend in all children-targeted media, including comic books, including children's movies, including this recent Blue's Clues episode. The list is never ending. Where do you come up with, it's just one time a month? It's never ending, ever. Never ending propaganda.
There is a large-scale statistical rise in LGBTQ plus representation in the month of June due to LGBTQ plus being like the gay month, right? This is queer month or whatever. That is something. Now, I would say
it steadily rises outside of that.
There is a steady rise, but the representation is a lot of times extremely subtle, and it's not really as bang it over the head as you think it is.
Sure is subtle.
Sometimes, yeah, some character will be like, yeah, I'm gay, and that'll be it. Yeah, that'll be it. It'll be like
sometimes
like, I'm gay, and that's
sometimes it's beat you over the head with it. But again, when we're discussing environmental factors, why in the holy shit do you think we wouldn't look at those as being environmental factors, Dylan?
Because
why?
There's no evidence.
That's insane. It's literally insane. We shouldn't look to those things.
Sorry, stop. Okay. All right. So, why? Okay. So make your point. We're gonna move on to the Q&A in a little bit, and also Andrew, Rob, Nor wants to debate you after this. So if you wanna round two after this. But yeah. So if you guys want to start sending your questions in, done. Sorry, I probably interrupted your train of thought there, but
yeah, we can do the Q&A. That's fine.
All right. So let me see there was only a few questions that I jotted down. So if you guys want to start setting them in, but from a more perfect America for Andrew, why do you want to age gate homosexuality in children's shows, but not heterosexuality?
Because heterosexuality is the default state that's absolutely necessary for the propagation of the species.
Okay. From Stardust, I'd be curious to know what BigPapaFascist thinks about intersex people and the gender assignment surgery they have.
If she would enjoy to have a conversation with me or debate on intersex, I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Okay, let me get to the rest of the question. Surgery they have when they're born, is he against that? They're 1.7% of the population. you want to answer that?
Was that a question to me?
No, it was Tam.
Oh.
I didn't catch the question. I'm sorry, Brittany. Can you repeat it for me?
Yeah. Okay, from Stardust. She said, I'd be curious to know what Big Papa Fascist thinks about intersex people and the gender assignment surgery they have when they're born. Is he against that? They're 1.7% of the population.
Actually, they're far less than that. Far, far less than that. What she's citing right there is a study that I've refuted many, many, many times. But intersex, the criteria that was used in that particular study was not correct criteria. They were lumping things together that actually were not intersex by any metric that we would define it as being. That's one. It's more like 0.6% or something as low as that. Two, there is no such thing in the human species as actual hermaphrodites. People seem to always get confused on this. We've only ever been able to produce pseudo-hermaphrodites. We cannot asexually reproduce. When you're talking about intersex people at birth, they still have primary sex characteristics. They either have an XY chromosome XX, or they produce small gametes or large gametes. They never have two functioning sets of sex organs ever. They couldn't, or they could impregnate themselves.
I love how you said I refute it and then didn't elaborate.
What? Refute, I'm sorry, say what? What?
There was like the study.
It's the Sterling study, and there's a refutation I've posted many times to the Sterling study.
Wonderful.
Was there anything,
Thank you so
was there
much for the
anything
evidence.
else? Would you like me? Do you want me to hunt down the study from a Q&A question right now, Dylan? Because I'll do it.
Yes. Just send it to me. I would like to see it.
Should I move on to the other questions or wait?
Just move on. I wanted to DM. I wasn't. I just.
Okay, so from go ahead. Sorry.
Also, can I ask one? Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
So the thing is, for me, that gets me about this whole latter half of the debate. How are we going to just make assumptions about
Dylan, do you mind clicking on that link that I just sent, which is the Fausto response to the Sterling study?
Sure, I clicked on it. Now, can I ask you the question? There you go.
No, you demanded the study, so
yes,
tell us
let him answer the question.
Tell us what it says since you demanded
Andrew,
it.
No,
just let him
I don't
ask
give
the
a fuck.
question.
Anyway, okay. The thing is, I get it, man. You don't respect women of authority. So, there's no evidence to back up anything you said in the latter half of this thing. And you admit it. And you just say, well, let's go with logic. Gay alligators with rainbow flags make kids
You said
gay.
the same thing.
But there is evidence to prove that what we're doing is helping children, is helping them with better mental health outcomes, the straight kids included. Why should I respect anything you've said in the later half of this if nothing you've said, whatever, is backed by any facts and just by you just raising it together?
You didn't provide any of that evidence in real time.
Yes, I did. I did. I'll send it to you right now. I did provide it. You want it? I'll give it to you right now. I'll read your thing. You read my thing.
What you said specifically was that there's environmental factors that contribute to homosexuality, and you didn't know what they were.
Yes, because scientists don't know what they were, so you're just,
right.
well, let's just guess. I bet it's
so
tomatoes.
That's the real
you
point,
could just say
then,
it was
isn't
tomatoes. You could guess
that's
whatever in the world.
That's the real point, then.
There's no evidence. If we don't know, we don't just make fucking weird-ass conclusions, okay?
Where it's not a weird conclusion.
Evidence. Yes, it is, because there's no
No,
evidence.
it's not.
There's no evidence. You have no evidence, no statistical data, no evidence whatsoever.
So if people are getting shot people are getting shot every day, we're not going to look at the guns if there's no evidence, if there's no study.
I don't think that the alligators with fucking gay flags is the evidence.
Okay. Anyways,
it's not at all similar.
Moving on. And when you guys do have questions, you have to tag politically provoked, not Dylan, because I won't see that. But I did catch this one. To Dylan, if male and female aren't clearly defined, then what's the point in transitioning?
Male and female, what's the point of transitioning? The point of transitioning is to help somebody who identifies as a woman or help somebody who identifies as a man live their life as what they identify as. Simple as.
Okay. I've lost some of
the
these
point
questions.
is to redefine reality is what the point is.
Fucking Matrix shit. Love it.
We live in two clearly different realities. One that has objective
Matrix
reality,
is actually
and one
about
that you live in where you can just define yourself as an attack helicopter.
Oh, God. One meme. They got one meme.
Somebody said from P-Tone, would Big Papa be down for round 2 with Destiny? You can dread it or run, but Destiny arrives all the same. Big Papa Fash.
Of course. I'll take Destiny in a future debate. I'm happy to.
So, well, yeah, well, you're gonna be okay to do Rob Nora right after this, right?
Yeah, I'll do Rob Nora right after this. But Destiny's a highly skilled debater. Absolutely.
Okay. Let's see here. From Crazy Hole, ask Andrew if he thinks it's unnatural when a female dog. Okay, dog. I'm not sure if it's going to be a troll question or not. I should start reading them first. And would you be okay showing Blue do that? No, I don't think that's a real question.
I would not be okay with showing Blue doing that in order to demonstrate anything. No.
All right. So from Cut Sleeve to Dylan, what does it matter if Big Papa Fascist is a fascist or not? How is that relevant to the debate?
Because he didn't have anything to say.
What that wasn't to you.
God, for somebody who's like a man of authority and of reality, he doesn't understand how to follow a simple rule. Okay, so the reason why I brought it up was just because he was like, I'm not normal, and I'm like, it's hard to like call someone else not normal when you openly call yourself a fascist on the internet in your name, whether or not you're fascist or not. It'd be like if I just like, as a joke, like, oh, all the righties call homosexuals pedophile, so I'm going to be pedophile 92. Like, that's probably not a good way to introduce yourself into any conversation. Not a good look. That's the only reason I brought it up. It's not normal.
Bullshit. You got logically cornered and you were trying to derail the conversation. And
you said it wasn't normal, man.
Everybody could tell what was going on. Give me a...
Everybody thinks you're a very big man, okay?
Okay, so from Radical Coder to both, I think we can all agree that representation might make people more likely to act on urges they might otherwise not act on, but that's not a bad thing, right? So I guess that's for both of you. I don't know if Dylan,
it's possible that it wouldn't be a bad thing. But again, if we're in the realm of trying to argue what's real, if my opponent says that there's just no way possible that
there's no evidence
children's cartoon would have any environmental effect at all, because there's just no evidence for it, which is
there's no evidence. If there's no evidence, I can't believe it. Okay,
right.
Look, so the same question about me banging your wife. Is it 100% falsifiable that I banged your wife? No, it isn't. Can't believe it. It's the same thing. You've got no 100% falsifiable evidence. No, the thing is, but you wouldn't suspect anything unless you saw maybe a condom over there or a thing over there. You wouldn't suspect anything. You need to see evidence before you make assertions.
Okay.
Okay, so from G Sneed, Dylan, is it wrong to not want your kids to be gay?
Yeah. I think it is. I think it is. And the main reason I would be is that I could understand maybe the main reason I would be able to accept it to a certain extent would be the idea that you want grandchildren and you would like grandchildren in that manner. That would be maybe the one instance where I'm like, okay, I can understand it to an extent. But if you actively don't want your kids to be gay, it actively means that you think your kids being gay is a negative thing. And I think it can be a very lovely thing. You can have a wonderful, healthy relationship. You can provide a service like through adoption centers and adopting kids and raising them healthily in an amazing way. I can understand somebody maybe being upset at the fact that they're not going to have grandchildren in the traditional manner. But I think mostly the best thing you can do is be accepting towards somebody, your child, once they come out to them. That's the best thing you can do possibly, I think.
Okay. So from Black Hammer of God to Dylan, is the relationship with your parents count as an environmental effect in your mind?
Yeah.
Okay. So them being gay would count as an environmental effect on their children then?
If we can find evidence that gay parents make people gay.
You just said yes, and now you're taking it back.
I just said yes. I just answered yes. I just answered if you can find evidence that environmental factor can make children gay, then yes.
No, you just unequivocally said yes, and then stopped.
Okay. No. So, okay, let me be detailed here. So the thing is, I acknowledge that environmental factors like relationships with parents could affect people being gay. Now, me acknowledging that in a relationship with parents could make somebody gay doesn't mean that having gay parents is one of the environmental factors that could make a child gay. It could be many other different things. That's a relationship with a parent that could make them gay. I haven't seen evidence of that to assert that. There's no evidence to provide for that, so I don't know if that's the case or not.
Okay, and from Jack the Hat, you gotta tag politically provoked or I'm gonna miss your questions. But he said for you guys to both define a man and woman.
A man is a person with XY chromosomes, and a woman is a person with XX chromosome. A man produces small gametes and has testes, and a woman produces ova and does not have testes.
a man is what I screw, a woman's what I not screw. But for real, a man is what we sociologically like put like certain like male and masculine characteristics on. A female is what we put feminine characteristics on. I personally kind of feel like these definitions are meaningless, but people like them, so I'll just go with it.
That's an objective lie. We do
Okay,
not
here we
define male and female that way.
Here we fucking go.
That is not how they're defined. They're not
Okay.
defined by what we just
I
think
don't-
they are.
Go ahead. Did you want to say something, Dylan? Or do you want me to move on?
I don't know if he meant okay. So it's a question about male gender or male sex, because male is like there's male sex organs of male sex, and then there's female sex with female sex organs, female things like that. I thought it was more a question about gender, but if the question is about sex, then yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to conflate it.
From Jacob Rose, what is wrong with more gay people living among us? And I'm assuming that's to you, Andrew.
Well, the problem is exactly what Dylan here outlined, which is that there's unknown environmental factors that are clearly helping for people to associate as being gay. Whether it's turning them gay, I think that you could maybe have a good conversation about whether or not that's true. But we can at least point to the fact that it's very likely that if you propagandize them, that it's a recruitment effort, and that that's what's actually going on, as these people do not breed. They're coming from somewhere.
Okay.
Coming for you, but this is just fear of the unknown. That's all it is, and that's usually what the right is when it comes to issues like this. Is they don't have any evidence to suggest that it's really a recruitment effort. They don't have any evidence to suggest that there's representation in media is going to do this. They don't have any evidence to suggest that the gay parents are going to turn all the kids gay. They don't have any evidence to suggest any of this, but it might be the case. Maybe. Who knows? So be scared.
Roommate, is Andrew saying that he doesn't want his tax money going to the prevention of bullying of specific groups? If so, who? If not, then how should these issues be addressed?
It's a ridiculous question. No, what we're talking about here is what's considered the affirmation of the family. That's what that entire Blues Clues song was about, the affirmation of what a family is. And I absolutely have a right to know where my money's going to. If it's going towards propaganda that's trying to explain to my kids what a family is or isn't, I think my definition of what a family is or isn't is just fine. I don't need their help with it. Thanks.
Okay.
So let me wait. Can I ask a question? What is a single mom and a son and maybe some grandparents? Would that be a family, or like what?
Yes, but it would not be optimal, and so that should not be promoted.
Do you think? Okay, I don't think anybody is specifically promoting like single moms going out and adopting or anything like that.
But they certainly are promoting homosexuals as being viable family units, and they're not telling you. They're not telling you that these aren't optimal arrangements, are they? That part was left out, wasn't it?
The thing is, I think it 100% depends on like the environment of the specific thing. Like, for example, like a lot of people are like, well, how is the gay man going to like have a conversation about periods with their daughter? Simple. I believe that a community raises a child. That could be a conversation for the grandmother. That could be a conversation
you do.
for the
You don't
aunt.
have any children. How would you know what raises a child? You don't have any.
Just because somebody raised a child doesn't mean they're good at raising kids. There's a lot of people who beat their kids. Just because I don't know if you raised a child or
No,
not.
not a lot of people beat their kids. That's bullshit. Some people somewhere beat their kids
That's
sometime.
nitpicky bullshit, okay?
No, it's not nitpicky
that
bullshit.
was nitpicky. Come on,
It's
you know I
not
wasn't saying like
nitpicky.
52% of people beat kids. Come on. That
I'm
is
not
100%
being nitpicky. I'm
That
telling
is
you what
nitpicky.
optimal family. I'm telling you what optimal
Oh my
family arrangements
God.
are, and
Okay.
that's what should be promoted.
All right. So from Crazy Hole asks both if they are okay with children's shows encouraging fascist ideals.
Well, according to some things I've read recently, that's what G.I. Joe did.
What?
The answer for me is no. That'd be bad.
Okay. Let's see, from Right Parody. Do you believe that binary thinking is a reasonable and intelligent way to approach dealing with a complex world?
No, which is why I don't think in binary terms. I'm able to disassociate gender and sex completely. Most of the proponents of transgender and transgender advocates can't do that. They can't. They continuously conflate them over and over and over again, which is why they get caught in these logical paradigms like Dylan Burns did the entire first half of this debate.
From Kazium, ask the fascist dude to name one LGBTQ focused show geared towards young children.
I can't name one that's specifically geared specifically towards kids.
Doesn't
off the top
exist.
of my head. No, but it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. What we're talking about specifically is LGBTQ messaging inside of these cartoons, not whether or not there's just tons of cartoons out there.
I thought they were
that would
everywhere.
be a little over the top, and I don't
fucking
think
everywhere,
society,
man.
all of this is always done incrementally. This is never just done to whack you over the head right away. It's all incrementally done, and it has been for 60 years. And anybody who says that that's not true hasn't been paying attention.
I don't know if this is a troll question. What are your thoughts on the van theory in relationship to children? Is that a troll question?
I have no clue. I don't know what that is.
I don't either. I'm going to move on. Okay, so from Black Hammer of God, Dylan, is there any concept of objective reality that you accept?
Any concept of objective reality that I accept? Yeah, I mean, like, I would say the most things that are like objectively like real to me, or like, I would say like stuff in like the physical world, right? Stuff in the physical
Like men
world.
and women?
Yeah, I would say penis exists, vaginas exist. The term men and women doesn't exist. Like,
what about male and female?
Male and female? Yeah, that exists.
Oh, okay, they do. So then, under that criteria of what's a male and female, we can determine who's engaging in same-sex activity.
Yeah, but
and
I
who
don't
isn't.
agree with what you. Okay,
I know you don't.
I don't want to rehash.
You
this.
keep on getting
we're
caught
right back.
back up in the same thing.
Back to, okay, so then the same person, I literally told you have to tag politically provoked, not the person you're trying to do a question to. These guys don't listen. All right, so from Big Papa Fascist, do you agree that trans women who present as women want to be treated as women but are biologically not women? If yes, how is that any way controversial?
Yes, trans women would be men who are pretending to be women in my estimation. That's what a trans female would be. They're not biologically women at all. So I don't think they should be treated the same way that sex is treated. There are certain criteria for it that you have to meet. Otherwise, you're what's called a phony, an imposter. That's what you would be.
Okay.
The effects of treating trans women as women are hugely beneficial to their mental health and their state. All psychological institutions understand this, especially the ones he sourced me actually agree with this concept as well. Gender affirming care is what they need, and I think that's exactly what we should do if we want to get
isn't
the best
that
mental health
interesting?
outcomes
Though,
possible.
but you'll dismiss their definition on what a homosexual is when it's.
But will you accept what I just said then?
I fully and 100% agree
but you
that the data that you have presented, which is none, but the data
I did present it. You just ignored it.
But the data that,
you ignored it. I need you to acknowledge it. No. I'm not. No. Acknowledge the data I provided earlier. I provided you data, and you just completely ignored it. No, I want you to answer this because you lied. I need you. I'm holding you down. I'm Big Pop. I'm Dylan Fascist now. This is the new personality.
Data? I'm looking at the
I
private
asked you
chat right now.
multiple times. I asked you multiple times if you wanted it, and you fucking ignored me. Here it is right now. Here is the evidence that LGBTQ plus affirming care in school helps straight kids, gay kids, and everyone else. It helps them all.
Let me finish answering.
Did you acknowledge that's reality? Since you love objective reality.
If you let me finish the question, I can
acknowledge
give
it
you
first.
literally the answer that you're looking for.
Wonderful. Now I'll let you answer the question.
I know for sure that based on the data that I have seen, that affirming these people seems to be helpful for them. That's true. That doesn't mean that it's helpful for the rest of normative society, including me. And it always seems to be very one-sided, these affirmations, doesn't it? Their version of reality must be affirmed, but my version of reality must be rejected. Fuck that. That's
how
bullshit.
Does it hurt you?
Because we can't even define what's real, Dylan.
Wait,
that hurts
how
all
does
of
it
society.
hurt you? How does it? Does it like have a bad psychological effect? I'm asking you how it hurts you.
I'm trying to
because we can't define. Like, is there any like thing statistically in society, or is there anything?
Are you gonna let me finish or not?
Sure, I'll let you finish. I'll allow it.
It's important to understand that if we define reality in two different ways, we can't make things like policy issues. We can't make things like this happen or work between ourselves because we can't define what's real. And that fucking affects me in a very negative way. Yes.
How?
I just told you.
You just said we can't define what's real, but how?
You don't
how
think
does
it
that affect
affects me
how?
if we can't come together to make policy decisions? Because we can't even agree on what's real. You don't think that
Well,
that's
the thing is, this when we talk about trans people and accepting that the policy decisions we're making is gender affirming care, making it easier for them
Those
to
are
like
your
change
policy prescriptions.
So
not
yeah,
my
but your policy
prescriptions.
prescriptions, you would have to acknowledge, would be stuff that would actively hurt the trans community and their mental health, as accepted by basically the psychological institution that you've sent me, because you said you don't want to give them the gender affirming care. You said you don't want to treat them the same as women. So
I do not want to treat them.
I want to hear how it actually
as,
hurts you. I want to hear.
Not treating them the same as I do biological women, because they're not. I don't think that that's the harmful that's the harmful outcome. I think that the harmful outcome to society is instead pretending that they are something that they're not, and that all other definitions must be rejected and thrown out the window.
Please, just tell me how it hurts you.
Totally true.
It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't. It doesn't affect you at all.
I've explained multiple ways.
You say it doesn't define reality. That's
and
not something that hurts you.
By the way, I
like,
don't
makes me have less money. It hurts me psychologically.
By the way, I
makes
don't
me have depression. That's not a thing.
Right,
we can
so,
measure these things in objective reality. By the way,
I don't base everything.
We can object these statistically in objective reality, whether it be the rates of depression, rates of suicide, lynchings, hate crimes. These are things we can measure in objective reality. What you're telling me right now is not something we can measure. It's just like, oh, it makes me angry.
Measure a woman who's trans. Then tell me what the quantitative portion of it is.
Okay,
you can't.
6'9" vampire queen.
Yeah,
that's a woman.
You can't do it. You've never been able to do it. It's a big problem that you guys have, by the way.
You sure love measuring women.
Okay. We are going to answer a few more questions, and we're just waiting on Rob. I sent him the link. So from Affinity, do you think children's media targeted at toddlers should deal sexual concepts at all? I'm guessing that's to you, Don.
Like sexual, like sex, like actual sexual intercourse? No.
Okay.
But can I actually expand on that? A lot of people think that like sexual orientation is like just sex, but I think that's like a lot of very sad people who have very shallow relationships. Sexual orientation a lot of times has to do with like just loving another person, wanting to be around that person, and deep emotional relationships. I'm deeply like homo-romantic. That's actually how I came to myself, is that I had wanted to have deep emotional relationships with men, more even than I wanted to have sexual relationships with men. And you show stuff like that in media all the time, whether it be like marriages in children's cartoons or stuff like that, which that stuff's 100% I think appropriate to like show children.
Okay. All right, so from Cut Sleeve, if the definition of man and women are meaningless, why does it give people distress when they feel they are the wrong stress?
He's saying if they feel like they're in the wrong body, right? Which there's no actual way that you could ever determine that you were in the wrong body. How the hell would you ever know what the right body was supposed to feel like? There's no way that you could ever know that. There's no way for me to know what a woman feels like. There's no way for a woman to know what a man feels like. It's impossible. Completely and totally impossible.
Brain scans.
No, brain scans deal with gender identity. They don't necessarily They don't necessarily deal at all. And this is all bleeding edge stuff that has not been replicated, by the way. And they do not deal at all with that type of crisis that he's talking about at all. Not even a little bit.
When we talk about like gender affirming care and surgeries and stuff like that, and people going through them, that actually does greatly reduce like rates of depression, like and many other negative effects that have on people's lives. So it does have a very large positive effect, and that's why anybody who wants to go through that, I think, should be supported.
Well, affirmations of almost any behavior, including alcoholism, may have some measurable positive effects on the alcoholic. That doesn't mean it's optimal, Dylan.
Well, the problem is the surgery doesn't lead. You're not going to get fucking colon. You're not going to fucking die from alcohol poisoning. You're not going to die from like woman poisoning from taking too many woman pills.
Oh, no, there's lots of risks that are associated with that type of surgery. What are you talking about?
But once you go through a successful surgery, you're good. You're clean. You're out. You're fucking out of the park. And not to mention the positive effects of affirming it help their lives much more, and them going through these procedures help them have much lower rates of suicide, depression, negative health effects. That doesn't really remain to be seen.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't really remain to be seen. I think there's already the data's already out there.
So we're going to do one more question, then we're going to do closing statements. Rob is actually sitting backstage, so we'll do that after. From Graham Jr., should small business loans that are reserved for women be given to trans women as well?
Hell yeah.
Okay. Papa Fascist?
I'm sorry. Should small business loans that are reserved for women be given to trans women as well? No, they're not women.
Alrighty.
This isn't hard. I mean, I'm sorry, but they're just objectively not. I don't know what else to tell you.
All right, so let's do final thoughts and closing statements. Andrew, why don't you go first?
Okay, so here's my closing statement. I can disassociate completely and totally gender from sex. Most of these new age leftists who constantly want to reaffirm trans identity cannot do that. And they lead themselves into paradox after paradox after paradox trying to explain this because they simply conflate the two constantly. Gender is, by their own admission, a social construction. If it's a social construction, then saying that a realistic biological phenomenon like homosexuality can then be intersected with this social construction is absurd. The two need to stay separate so that we can understand what's real and what's not real. When it comes to cartoons, I demonstrated that my opponent, by his own admission, has stated multiple times that there's environmental factors that contribute heavily to being homosexual. He has said that many times. He just doesn't know what they are, but says that it's not logical for me to point towards media consumption as being a contributing factor, which is absolutely insane.
All right, Dylan.
The entirety of this discussion, I was ready to have a long-term discussion about like the toxicity of YouTube's children's content and how it produces brain rot and the reduction in quality of children's content, how it needs to improve, and how going back to a more Mr. Rogers style of teaching things. I was ready for that discussion. I was not ready for whatever the hell just happened. But
you should have put on the right sneakers.
Andrew, it's not
Andrew.
your closing. Go ahead.
Andrew, God, man.
Go on. He won't do that again.
God. Telling you, man. Anyway, what we did witness was somebody who wanted to make assumptions based on no evidence whatsoever. That he didn't want to look at statistics, he didn't want to look at the own psychological institutions he cited, and he certainly didn't want to look at my data. And in fact, I had to fucking bully him to look at my data, to look at what I was said. Hey, I can send it to you right now. He didn't want it. He had no interest in having his mind change. He just doesn't want homos on the television screen. It just doesn't make him feel comfy, 100%. Now, when we look at children's media and we talk about LGBTQ plus representation, he had this idea of recruitment, that we're going out to recruit kids. I personally don't need anybody else in my pool of dating. I am fine. I can get enough as is, okay? I don't need to recruit young people to do that. Now, he has shown no evidence whatsoever that these positive representation of LGBTQ plus people in media would produce more homosexuals. But what I did show is that it has massively positive effects, not only on gay youth, but on straight youth as well. Meaning that if you're a homosexual or a heterosexual or trans or anywhere under the umbrella, as a youth, when you get this not only in your media, but in your schools, LGBTQ plus affirming programs, it is extremely effective in helping with your mental health. And it can help massively decrease the rates of bullying in our schools. And so if there is no evidence whatsoever to show that it would have negative side effects, and that we were just making assumptions and predictions using the logic that a gay alligator with a flag is going to turn your kids homo, that's his logical assumption with no evidence, while mine is showing the real statistical evidence of the positives of LGBTQ plus representation in media. That is provable, that we have the data right now for, not the data for tomorrow that might one day come if Big Papa Fascist gets his wonderful study group.
All right,
By the
thank
way,
you so.
Can I stay in here for Rob Noor? I want to just watch that happen.
How'd
Sure.
that rail taste, Dylan? Did that rail taste pretty good? Should have put on the right sneakers, buddy.
All
You
right,
say rail,
so
do you mean like dick or? Oh, the thing is. Okay, got it. Okay. I'm not interested, Big Pop. I'm sorry.
All right, so I'm going to bring on Rob, and let's see. All right. Hi, Rob.
Hey,
How are
Rob.
you?
Hey, what's up? What's happening, Dylan?
So I'm going to put him back. Welcome to Politically Provoked.
Glad to be here.
I know that you were mentioned in the beginning, and so you wanted to address it. So
Yeah, I was watching the movie Coco with my 5-month-old son. So my wife's pissed that I had to leave because I had a bunch of people say that some clout chaser said that I was a grifter or something like that. So, I guess the first question I have is, you said you reached out to me many times. I give you permission to show all DMs you have between you and me. Go ahead and put them on the screen.
How about I just put a video out on the screen instead of you asking me if I would join you in a debate? Would you like me to do that? Because I recorded it.
I don't deny that. That's fine.
Okay, well then what are you talking about?
You said that I continue. You asked me many times.
I've been
to
in
talk
your
about
chat.
transition.
I've been in your chat
Show me the
many
receipts.
times.
Let's see it. Let's see it. Show me the
I
receipts.
didn't record those engagements, but I did record. But I did.
okay.
So okay, Andrew, I know one of your styles is as a grifter. I know the game. You're going to try to talk over me. I get it. I know what you're going to do. So this is the full story. What happened? I actually like BigPapaFascist. I think that we agreed on a lot. No one's going to agree with everything, whether you're on the right, left, anywhere in between. I think it's nice, particularly on Twitch, to see people coming from a conservative angle that are quality debaters. And I thought that I would like to be on a panel with BigPapaFascist, even if we didn't necessarily agree with everything. Oh, did I lose you all?
No, we're here.
No, we're here.
Wait. I think my internet connection crapped out here.
Well, we can still hear you. I know Andrew's been wanting to debate at Neocon.
I'm sorry, my internet connection. I don't know what's going on. Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Check.
So, is Rob a neocon?
Well, so here's the thing. It's interesting that Rob came on to call me a grifter. Thus far, I have made absolutely zero money on doing any of these debates ever. Never taken a dime. Brittany, have I ever taken a dime from Politically Provoked even one time?
No, but we don't have many dimes to give, so.
Right, but even if we did, I've never taken a dime from that. I've never made a single dollar doing any of this. In fact, it's cost me money. So exactly how am I grifting? Now, Rob, on the other hand, have you received any money from your Twitch activities? Of course you have.
Sure. Sorry, my internet connection was fine. So here's what happened. Again, I didn't have anything cross to say to BigPapaFascist. He did reach out to me in DMs, right? Do you remember that?
Via Twitter, yes.
Yeah. And what did you say? Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head, no.
What you said was that I banned you from my Twitch channel.
Yeah, that's true. I got that on video too.
Right. So I looked. I did not ban you. What happened was your Twitch channel was banned by Twitch, not by me. I talked to you during the chat. I talked to you during my stream. I said, I'm looking right now. You're not on the ban list. I would unban you right now. I'm literally looking. I can't find it. I don't know what the problem is. You then said to me, oh, my channel got banned. Don't worry about it. That's what you said.
Stop. Here's what happened, and I'll explain it in depth. There's a difference. If you get banned from a chat on Twitch, it says you were banned from this chat. If you have an improper name that they don't like or something like that, and they ban you globally, you cannot access Twitch at all. It's not just a ban inside of chat.
I did not ban you. You said in the direct messages not to worry about it, that your channel got banned. I actively tried to look as I was streaming.
I don't have a channel. The name.
So really quickly, I was kind of actually hoping that, I guess this is fine too, but to have that kind of debate that, Andrew, you've been wanting to have about the...
No. I'll have that debate. I will, but I want to say my piece first.
Yeah, say your piece.
Yes, right. So, and if I could screen share, I could put the DMs that we had. He said, no worries, man, that it was his channel. Right. So he's just bullshitting you here.
No.
I didn't ban him. I didn't ban him. I did not ban him.
I'm not concerned about the ban.
I did not ban him. It's bullshit, but it's irrelevant anyways. The point I'm trying to make is he clearly knows how to DM me. Right. And if he reached out to me, as he said, many, many times, and I was afraid to debate trans issues because I'm putting neocon talking points out there. First off, I decry neocons and condemn them pretty much with the entirety of my show. Second, the second most topic that I debate, as Dylan will be able to address, is probably trans issues and LGBT
Then I will concede this and apologize to you. I've literally right now. If you will say on air right now that trans women are not real women.
Trans women aren't women.
Okay, I can see.
I've never said no. Wait. No, let me.
And I apologize.
Let me finish. I don't respect you. Right? That's a position. I literally debated Destiny. There's a clip where Destiny takes me out of context, right? And it put me on the front page of Reddit because he took me out of context. Where a minute after that, out of context, I say, Destiny, will you at least concede that this claim that trans women is bullshit? He says, of course. I've never denied that. What I don't respect is you clout chasing and coming on and spreading outright bullshit about me. I reached out to him over and over and he's unwilling to say this shit. That's garbage. And you're saying that because you're someone who I respect. You're trying to get a voice and you're trying to get out there. That's fine. I respect people I disagree with that are being good faith and honest more than pieces of garbage like you that's going to just blatantly make something up about me. Now, I understand, Brittany. I understand that you don't want personal attacks. Understand that I'm watching a movie with my child as this guy brings me into a debate I have nothing to do with and then says a bunch of stuff about me that he's just blatantly lying. Go ahead, provide the receipts that you reached out to me over and over and I was unwilling to say. Now, you...
Trans women are women, by the way. Just throw that out there.
Reached out to me and I was intentionally ducking you because I'm grifting for money.
Stop.
If I'm grifting for money, why would have I in the past and to you right now said exactly what you said would be necessary to prove that I'm not grifting for money?
Are you going to let me respond or not?
Sure.
Okay. So I reached out to you in multiple of your chats to discuss this with you on your own chats. Now, I will pull up your previous live streams and I will pull up those chats. Sure. Yes.
What's your name on the chat?
I will send those to you.
What's your name on the chat?
Democratic Fascist.
Okay, and what did you ask me that I refused to respond to?
I tried to discuss with you multiple times that the issue of our time is the non-reality of trans issues and that's what needs to be addressed more than anything else, the same as I did with Aircraft Sparky. They're consistently ignored, and the reason that I think they're consistently ignored is because I think that people on the right on Twitch don't want to get their channels banned.
I mean, it's one of the dumbest comments you could make when literally I have a channel. For example, I debate on my channel every Wednesday. I have a debate. Probably 50% of those debates were with trans people. In those debates, I've talked about how that, like, the idea that people get smeared as TERFs because you had these third wave feminists that talked about, you know, women are uniquely victimized and we have this patriarchy, how they're butting heads now because they realize that a lot of the strategies they employed, calling people bigots, are being employed by people further to the left of them in the trans community. And imagine saying that you expect unique challenges as a woman because of the way the patriarchy is set up. And then other people saying, yeah, I agree. Oh, by the way, I'm a woman too. And they're like, no. You didn't experience the pain or the discrimination that we had. You might be experiencing other stuff for being trans, but you're not a woman, right? I've recently reached out to Vosh and was trying to debate Vosh on this topic. I'm not going to say that he's a grifter afraid to debate me. You know what it is? He has a schedule. He's busy.
If
right? And I'll say this real quick, and then I promise you can say whatever you need. Literally, this guy's argument to me right now that came on and accused me of being a neocon grifter that wouldn't talk about trans issues. All that's bullshit. I'm an anti-neocon. I talk about trans issues all the time. I literally said the things that he said I was afraid to say. All of this is based on the fact that he says, well, while you were live streaming, I said something in the chat that you didn't respond to. How pathetic is that? That means if any of you said something in this chat of this video right now and BigPapaFascist didn't respond, then you have every right to call him a grifter that's ducking you because he didn't respond to what you said in the chat. It's pathetic.
Stop. If I categorically got it wrong, then I'll publicly right now apologize. Now, you and I can both agree that there are a lot of grifters on the right. After having in-depth conversations with some of these grifters, I may have categorized you inside of that box incorrectly, and you have every right to come on and defend your good name. And I will concede that if I categorically got this incorrect, I apologize. But it has nothing to do with clout chasing, because I've never chased clout, ever. I don't need to. And I've most certainly never grifted, because I've never taken a dime for anything. Now, it's fair enough for you to come on and tell me you got this categorically wrong. And I'll concede that I got it categorically wrong, and I apologize if I did.
Okay, well, it seems clout chasing isn't necessarily, and grifting isn't just for money, right? I'm just saying, I wouldn't do that to anyone. I wouldn't do that to Dylan. I wouldn't do that to anyone on the left. I wouldn't just say because I asked them something in chat and they didn't respond.
I don't know. This is like Ron DeSantis versus like Donald Trump. Like, I guess Ron DeSantis, I would root for him, but like ultimately
was that there's a lot of people on the right.
You don't want either to win, but
people on the right.
I mean, I guess I'm with Rob here. Not like on any of his positions, but I just kind of want him to win.
Terrified of the consequences. I may have conflated you inside of that in error, and if I did, I apologize for doing so.
Okay. And the last thing I'll say in it, and then we could debate the issue, right? That's fine. I didn't even know if I'd be able to stream on YouTube because I have 2 community strikes because of conversations surrounding COVID, right? I've literally, the first time I was on a panel and I talked about trans issues on Twitch, I was new to Twitch. I didn't know all of their TOS. I got about 15 DMs from right-wingers saying they're going to ban you on Twitch because I was talking about trans issues. I was like, I don't give a shit. All I could do is say what I believe. I'm not going to believe everything you believe on LGBT and trans issues. For example, I support gay marriage. We could have that debate. But the idea that I have these positions because I'm some sort of grifter or I'm afraid to say stuff is just abject nonsense. But we could get into the issues. I don't mind talking about that.
Okay, well, Rob, first and foremost, if I categorically got this wrong, and I think I may have, I do apologize. Will you accept my apology?
I accept the apology. I do.
Okay, thank you. So when we get into gay issues, okay, and we're talking about gay marriage, why is it that you support gay marriage?
Because I feel that ultimately the government shouldn't have any stake in marriage whatsoever. If you love someone and you're a consenting adult, you should be able to have intercourse for anyone for any reason that you want if you're consenting adults. And that the government shouldn't be the ones to certify that certain types of that are special. But if the government is involved, they have no right to discriminate based on sexual orientation.
Gotcha. Okay. So when Dylan's talking about these environmental factors that possibly lead towards people becoming homosexual, do you think that it's possible that some of these cartoons or the overrepresentation of homosexuals might have something to do with why there's such an increase in LGBTQ activity, which would include the normalization of marriage between LGBTQ people?
I absolutely think it's possible.
Okay, well then why would you? Well then, what happens there is you have two conflating issues. And while I understand that you don't want the state to
we
be
have
involved
no
in marriage,
evidence, none.
Stance.
We're working off of an idea that he's just saying this with no evidence. Like, is it possible? I mean, I don't know. It could be like something in the air that's leaking from some factory somewhere that making people more gay. We have no clue. We don't know the environmental factors, and it's certainly, I don't think it's like a gay alligator in a children's cartoon.
May lead, to an increase in the number of homosexuals that are out there, right?
Okay. So you're conflating multiple
Whatever's making the frogs gay made
One,
me gay.
just because I concede that this environmental factor could be possible, it's not 100% proven. It's certainly something that we should have in the back of our mind when this stuff's being discussed. But I don't think, I would certainly say it's something we need to look at, and it could be true, but I don't think it's definitively proven. Having said that, though, the conversation of gay marriage has nothing to do with this. For example, if you look at polling, gay marriage is incredibly popular, even amongst Republicans at this point. Certainly, it's popular with independents. Right. But so the idea that this is something that, well, we need to have this statement because the government has the rights to protect people, and this isn't what the people want. Now, you're going to say, well, that's because culture propaganda influenced people in this direction. But even if that would be true, then your statement that that's not what people want right now is inaccurate. Right? This is what people want right now. I think that the debate of gay marriage is over. I think that it's a loser for conservatives. Who you are interested in sexually as an adult is the least interesting thing about you. I also feel the same about if you want to be trans in your adult. I don't give a shit at all. You shouldn't be treated like crap because of your ground? What's that?
So you're willing to give ground.
How is that giving ground?
Well, because what we're after is a normative society, right?
Well, first off, right? Like, I don't disagree with you, particularly on the trans issues, but I can even concede on the LGBT issues that we wouldn't consider it what has historically been called normal. I just don't give a shit. That's not I'm more concerned about liberty and freedom than someone's definition of what they think normal is and trying to have society reach that goal.
Yeah, but when we're talking about liberty and freedom, we can't have propaganda that does everything that it possibly can to influence what your children do or don't do and this type of thing. Wouldn't that be correct?
Well, that's a different issue than gay marriage.
Well, I don't think it is because gay marriage pushes normalcy, right? This
is where you're hurting your argument. Like, I think you did pretty good with your debate with Dylan, but when you take into factor that you're also saying, so you're saying, I don't want transsexual issues or LGBT issues on children geared for 3-year-olds. And also that's part and parcel to my stance that I'm also against gay marriage.
Yeah.
Like, taken as a collective. Well, I think that they're two separate issues.
But they're clearly intertwined if we're talking about environmental factors. One of the questions to Dylan was he was asked if the relationship you have with your parents could be considered an environmental factor as to what ends up happening in your life. He said yes, and then he stopped. When I called him on this and said, okay, well then if your parents are gay, that could obviously lead to some type of environmental factor that could lead towards the promotion of homosexuality, he backed right off. Right.
That's
so
not
I
true.
do
Can
think,
I wait?
I,
That was a
no,
statement
you
of what I
can't.
said. Can I
We're
respond
done.
to that? Wait, he's making claims about me. Can I at least respond to that?
I don't care.
In
It's
any
not
case,
my show, though.
in any case, what I was saying,
Well, I was
Rob,
asking Brittany.
was that
She's the host.
I do think that these things are intertwined and that they can't be separated.
Okay, so wait, let me just be clear. I said that it might when it was said, could it then being gay affect them? I said possibly, but there has to be evidence provided for that, and there's none at the moment. That's all I said.
Listen, I'm more than willing to talk about the topic that you had with Dylan. Hopefully, we'll get into that, right? Because I think I'll have some agreements with you on that.
Well, I was just using it as an example.
Right. So talking about gay marriage specifically, let me ask you a question. Do you think that sort of the push you're talking about with culturally pushing LGBT issues, is that more of a recent phenomenon?
No.
When do you think it started?
I think that it started very heavily in the 60s.
Okay. Do you think before the 60s there were adults that were homosexual?
I think that there were adults who were engaged in homosexual activity, yes.
Okay. So then the question I have is this, like, how do you take into account then if those people existed, even in
very
smaller
specific.
numbers? Like we can definitely
That's
concede there were
very
less
specific.
openly homosexual people before the 60s than after, and certainly those numbers have been increasing. I don't dispute any of that. But how was your argument then that, well, those people also shouldn't have been allowed to be married because somehow this has to do with cultural pressure?
Well, it could be that
with this.
It actually could be that they were groomed even at the time. It's an interesting conundrum as homosexuals don't replicate. Since they don't replicate, we generally would have to point towards environmental factors. Whether or not grooming happened before the 60s, I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure it was commonplace. Grooming is fairly commonplace in the LGBTQ community.
But listen, the idea that you could only be homosexual through being groomed is nonsense. I don't dispute that. I think environmental factors.
How do you know it's nonsense?
Well, because we have seen homosexuality since the beginning of human history.
We don't know if that was due to grooming or not.
Okay, but that's exactly right. We don't know. How about that? Then we'll stand there. So then you can concede that someone could be born.
If there's no biological factor, right, and it's environmentally based, then I think that it's a fairly safe assumption.
But you could see that, right? You're jumping the gun here. You're saying if
that's true, but
be clear,
we do. The only thing I can
the scientists have been able to quantify biological stuff.
They
think it's also environmental, but they have yet to be able to quantify that. One example would be hormones while the woman is pregnant with you.
For example, there are people that are physically attracted to people that are heterosexuals that we consider not attractive people normatively.
Okay, but you have a flaw.
But was that because they were groomed? Or was that because that's just
you have
part
a flaw,
of who
you have a flaw in what you're saying when you say that it's biological, right? Which is that how can it possibly be hereditary or passed down if these people aren't replicating, Rob?
That you don't have something. Everything that's biologically inherited to you doesn't necessarily go towards self-replication.
I agree that that's true. However, it seems that the numbers seem to coincide with an increase in LGBTQ activity as the propaganda has increased.
Okay, but we can see that there were
also it has also coincided with acceptance, and it has coincided with that a lot more clearly. And the science seems to point to that, so I don't know why you need the propaganda. I mean, I guess that he thinks acceptance of gays is propaganda.
What years are you talking about here?
So, for example, like in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s,
okay.
And obviously we became, and which I think is better. We stopped persecuting people that were homosexual more as time went on. But certainly in this country's history,
so there was less homosexuals when we weren't promoting homosexuality. I'm so shocked.
Right. Another way of putting it is there were less homosexuals when we were demonizing homosexuality.
Oh, I see. So you're going to take the left's argument on this and say that
that's
the whole
not
problem is that
I'm not
they're all
concerned
hanging
if
out.
It's the left's argument if it's the truth.
They were all hanging out in the closet.
Come on, Rob, you lefty cuck.
Listen, it's funny how you kind of disprove your own argument strategy right here. You say, oh, well, if we're promoting homosexual issues and therefore there are more homosexuals, that's the reason why. But then the counter to that would be if we're denouncing homosexuals, wouldn't that be a reason that there's less homosexuals? And you're like, oh, that's the left wing's position.
Only if you agree that there's no environmental effects.
I didn't say that.
Okay, well then how
I'm
much
not making that claim. You're making the claim that there's no biological. I'm saying it could be both.
How much of it is environmental?
I have no clue.
Right, you have no clue. So it's safe.
It's irrelevant to the question of gay marriage.
What?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, so then it would be safe for me to assume that if we don't know, the only thing that I can do is look at it as logically as I can. It may be true, possibly, that there is a massive biological element and these people were just forced to stay in the closet when we didn't accept them societally. It could also equally be true, though, that what happened instead is that we didn't provide an environment for homosexuality to be promoted. You can't really dismiss that as an argument if you think that environmental factors have to do with homosexuality. And if we don't know how much, then I can assume that all of its environmental,
more evidence points towards it being acceptance. Also, for a guy who BigPapaFascist who really doesn't like homosexuality, why is he basically participating in an orgy right now where a bunch of guys are getting fucked? I don't know why he's doing that.
That's a fact.
But listen, you're making my point for me, right? Like you're just conflating things. I'm saying that it's most likely a combination of the two.
Okay.
That's my argument, right? You're saying, well, if we admit that, which you're admitting, you don't know.
Okay, yours is possible.
Wait, Andrew,
yours is possible, but I do have evidence for mine, which is to show the direct correlation between the increase of LGBTQ activity and the pro-LGBTQ propaganda. That's what I'm saying.
But
whereas you have no evidence. There's no evidence you can point to that biological.
I'd like to see like some statistics on that or some like evidence on that because I haven't seen that. You want to know what? If you look at Russia and Hungary, where gays are getting hate crimed and they pass these anti-gay hate laws, you want to know what that didn't do? Stop homosexuality. There's still homosexuals in those countries.
Then how do you explain the fact that homosexuality existed when we demonized it?
I've already told you that. I think that there was lots of grooming that happened, just like there was lots of grooming that happened in Rome. Just like there was lots of grooming that happened in many pro-LGBTQ societies, and still goes on to this day as part of a culture of the Middle East, for instance.
Right. Yes? So you're just making assumptions that every person that's ever been gay was because they were sexually molested or groomed or something like that.
I'm not making assumptions.
You have no evidence for that.
I just told you what my evidence was for it. You
don't have evidence. Your evidence. So listen, I understand. I like the back and forth, but
this is like the bigoted chicken or the egg.
Right.
So who was the first gay? Who groomed who?
Positive, right? Your evidence just says, well, if we see an increase.
What came first, the groomer or the groomee? What came first, the groomer or the groomee?
The reason they're LGBT,
there it is, chicken and the egg.
All of them is because it's being promoted. But that's not true. If that was the case, then we would see when we were demonizing LGBT people, certainly there wouldn't be any LGBT people. In fact, if we took a neutral position and we no longer promoted or demonized, we just said we're not going to talk about this stuff whatsoever. If your assumption was correct, there would be exactly zero LGBT people.
Okay, well then
how is there? Let me ask you this: if no one could ever be born and it has no biological factors, who was the first person that groomed an LGBT person?
I don't know.
Well, wait a minute. They had to be groomed themselves. It's impossible for them to have been gay, to be born gay, right? They had to have been groomed. So who groomed the first person?
I have no idea. I have no idea how it went down. I don't think it's really relevant.
So then that's true. You don't have any idea. So for you to make these positive claims that you know that it's 100% environmental, particularly when we could see if that was the case, we would expect to see very limited LGBT people when we were literally demonizing.
Let's stop and back up. Let's stop and back up. Okay. What's your evidence that being homosexual is biological?
I have the exact same amount of evidence that it's biological as I do that it's environmental.
Okay, so none.
But are you saying I have none that it's environmental?
Just stop and answer that simple question.
So none. Okay, so the first evidence I would give is that before,
I'll explain.
Right. So I'll give you the first answer. The fact that before there was environmental pressures to be gay, someone was the first gay.
Okay, so again, back to my question. You have no evidence that there's any.
Is that not evidence? Okay. You said I can't answer that. That's what your argument.
It's not evidence. You could maybe logically.
How is that not evidence?
You can logically maybe present that, but it wouldn't be evidence of anything. So what
just like what you're doing, you're not presenting evidence.
Rob, I do have evidence, and the evidence that I have is the correlation between the rapid increase in the amount of LGBTQ people and the pro-propaganda. When you're talking about biological evidence, you have nothing at all. I can at least point to that as being something that's statistically significant.
Again, so we're just running in circles here. But again, the counter to that is if your argument was true, we would expect to see almost no people in the LGBT community when we were not only not promoting LGBT issues, but we were demonizing them.
Well, no, that's not true. That's a bifurcation.
And then you get out of that by saying, well, they were groomed. You don't have proof that they were all groomed. You just assume that they were groomed. That's not evidence, right? You're the one who's making a positive claim. I'm making the claim that I think both environmental and biological factors could factor into being LGBT. That's my claim. You're saying, no, it's not biological, it's just environmental, and your only evidence is something that could be correlation, not causation, which is that there is a promotion.
It could be possible.
By the way, here's a study right here.
No evidence, and
right here.
Something I can point to.
This talks about how the biological studied factors that like make people gay. It's the thing is
the lack of demonization of LGBT.
There is most likely a lot of biological factors, but partially some environmental factors. I lean towards more biological than environmental, though. But there are most certainly biological factors, meaning that if you accept the science, which at this point is almost proven, probably proven even,
well, whether or not they can get married,
then you can't say that it was all because of molestation.
Environmental factors that you believe in. That's my whole point here.
Well, it might not be totally environmental factors. I don't know. I think the environmental that's the point, right? You can't say, well, because environmental factors could have had something to do with it, therefore we should be against anyone who's gay, even as an adult, because they've been duped into it with environmental factors. We don't know that. We don't know. There is an equally likely possibility that it could be biological.
I can at least point to statistical significance of the increase with the increase in propaganda. I at least have that. That's one thing I can look. That's one thing I can look at. Look, from your particular end, when you say, I support gay marriage, but you say at the same time there could be environmental factors that lead to them being gay. I don't really understand why the support is there if you're saying that the possibility that they're gay, in your worldview, exists within the confines of.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Someone just brought it up in chat. There's also animals that were gay. Do you think gay propaganda and molestation happened in the animal kingdom?
I'll even steelman you. You're not saying that biology couldn't factor in. It's just super rare. Almost all of people that are LGBTs because they've been pushed there by environmental factors. Is that fair to say? That's your position?
It would.
I'm not trying to misrepresent you.
It would be fair to say that I don't have any reason to believe at all that there's a biological function that requires you to be a homosexual. Yes.
Okay. So you basically agree with me. Funny way of agreeing with me there. Okay. So nonetheless, let's say that's true. So every adult that's gay now, right? So Dylan, shake your head if you mind me using you as an example. Is it all right if I use you as an example? Okay. So Dylan's an adult, right? Let's say he is LGBT.
Child, but sure.
He's homosexual. I don't know if you're homosexual or bisexual, but I know you've said you're a member of the LGBT community. So he decides he wants to marry a man, right? And your argument is, well, the only reason Dylan's came to that conclusion was because societal pressure when he was young pushed him in that direction.
The only evidence I can point to.
Okay, even if that's true, maybe we have a debate on what we should do about these societal pressures on children. Mm-hmm. Why, despite of how Dylan as an adult came to the decision that he came to today, whether it be biology, whether it be because he was, duped into it through societal pressures, still to this day, at the point he's at, who are you to tell him that he's not allowed to love or marry someone that
I'm a father and a living member of society, and I'm able to determine how I want society to be run, just like you are, and I have equal say as to how I want society run. And I find homosexuality to be an immoral proposition, and I don't see anything in particularly wrong with stating that they should not be given the same credence for marriage that heterosexuals have. I don't think that it's good for society, and I don't think it's good for us personally, ever. And at this point, Rob, I kind of want to retract what I said earlier and say to you, you are shilling leftist positions, and the leftist position, we're not going to give ground ever on the LGBTQ thing, because Rob, if you give ground on any of it, this is what we end up with. This is where we always go with it. Now, we got furries and transsexuals and everything else who have co-opted the entire infrastructure that LGBTQ people have created over a 60-year span. How can you argue that that's not true? Of course they have.
Rob, I'll give you an out right now, Rob. I'll give you an out right now. You can call me Dirty Queer once, and I'll like you again. I promise. He'll love you again.
So here's the point, right? And
me,
this is one of the problems that I have, right, with people that think that they could gatekeep what it means to be a political ideology, right? So you're like, if I don't totally agree with you, then I take back my apology where I said you were a grifter because we have a difference of opinion on whether or not gay marriage should be
apology
legal.
on the fact that you're a grifter.
Okay,
I apologize for having said that, but it does sound like you're shilling out for left-wing positions here, yes.
No, what it is I have a position that's my own. There is no person in this world, nor no political ideology, nor no political party that will totally agree with everything I say. If you're a free thinker, you would say the same thing. So would Dylan, so would Brittany, so would Todd.
Where do you draw the line in the sand, Rob?
Okay, please, I noticed this, like, I think this is a good conversation, but you got to give the other person a chance to respond. Like, you're talking in big blocks.
Just as
much
as you.
I know, because I'm someone who talks in big blocks. So let me respond, and then you're willing to say. The idea that people could take things too far is fine, right? But the problem is that doesn't mean that we shouldn't come to the conclusion ourselves of what we think is acceptable and what's not. Everything that you've said, notice, I think if people are listening, they can see how you're conflating issues. So you originally said, my objection to gay marriage is because I think that people, culture is putting environmental pressures on people to be gay, and gay marriage would somehow be inflicted with that. So people that were gay were only duped into being so by environmental factors. That's why I'm against. That is what you said. No. Now you're making a different claim. No, altogether.
You're just making shit up.
The entire first part of this debate, like, if you could sum it up in 30 seconds, before you got to the homosexuality is immoral part, what were you saying? When you objected to me saying I'm for gay marriage. No,
the entire first part.
When you objected to me saying I was pro-gay marriage.
Yeah.
What were you objecting? You didn't say it was immoral. What was your objection?
My objection to you being pro-gay marriage was to tell you that, hey, if you agree that there's environmental factors that are involved here, why would you promote increasing the environmental factors? Right.
So it had nothing to do with the idea that homosexuality was immoral.
Well, so we didn't get to that, but yes, it does.
Right. So then when I bring up the point, I'm like, even if it was true that environmental factors lead to adults, which I don't think that you've proven that that's the only thing. I am willing to say that I think you're right, that environmental factors do play a lot into it.
So let's increase them.
Yeah, well, it has nothing to do with that, right? So my point is, I'm making a separate case about gay marriage. And when I make the point, even if that's true, even if we concede your argument and say environmental factors are overwhelmingly the reason for this, why would we tell an adult? Because your argument would be, correct me if I'm wrong, that an adult gay person was basically duped into it. You would have sympathy for them, correct?
Basically, that wouldn't be the case, by the way. Like, we have a lot of evidence for biological factors.
If they were only victims of environmental pressures, then why wouldn't you have sympathy for them?
Psychopaths might be the victim of environmental pressures. That doesn't mean that I would have sympathy for them.
Okay. Nonetheless, are you saying that all people in the LGBT community are psychopaths? You can't say that any would be sympathetic.
I didn't say that at all, Rob. You just
right.
For no particular reason.
So then it's not really a response. I'm just saying that if your argument is, well, all adults that are in the LGBT community are only in that community because they were groomed or because environmental pressures put them that way, why is that a reason to tell those people, since they've already gone through that they can't love who they want or be in a relationship with who they want or get married to who they want?
Because
then you're like, well, because it's immoral. Different question.
No,
different
that's not what
argument.
I said you wouldn't want to promote the very thing that put them in that situation in the first place, which would be an overage of environmental factors. And if you're conceding that environmental factors, as you just did, you just said, let's just say in this hypothetical, I concede that the environmental factors are overwhelmingly what's caused this issue. Okay, then why would you promote that we have more environmental factors to cause the issue? It makes no sense.
Because just because something's an environmental factor that could increase doesn't mean that there's a better reason. For example, right? We could say that the promotion of the free sex movement in the 60s was something, even heterosexual free sex. We could say that that was an environmental factor that led to LGBT, right? Because we loosened kind of the puritanical ideas we had about sex, right? You would say that?
I guess within that decade.
Okay, so then would you say, well, then we have to be against promoting the idea of premarital sex or saying that things like that are acceptable? Because if we say that that's
wise to do, yeah.
Well, I agree. I think that we should discourage.
Then why are you arguing with me about it?
Because the point is, there are all sorts of things that you could say are also an environmental factor that could lead to LGBT promotion, but we don't ban something just because we say that there's some negative that it could have if there's a greater good. The greater good in allowing gay marriage. Right. The greater good in allowing gay marriage is this. You don't have a right to tell consenting adults who they could sleep with.
We absolutely
because it doesn't fit into your vision of ideal society.
We for years were able to manage that problem however we saw fit. And for years we were able. Do you think
it should be illegal for gay people to have sex?
For years we were able to manage this problem with smut on TV, even using legislation. I don't see any particularly big problem with that, especially when you consider how readily porn is accessible to people. That seems to rewire their brain, seems to do horrible things to them. I don't see any particular reason not that you can't regulate activities that are bad for society. We do it all the time.
We don't have that. That's a different question. Like you're sidestepping the issue. Saying
whether or not
a gay person could get married is not the same as saying should we allow smut on daytime TV.
No, but what I'm giving you an overage here of saying that you can regulate societal behavior, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that would include gay marriage, which we did forever and ever and ever. So okay. What's the problem?
Let's just go through some examples then. Like given that you think gay marriage should not be legal, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Should it be a crime to have gay sex?
In the military, probably yes.
What about in general society?
No, I don't think that we're going to be able to.
Why? But wait a minute. Isn't that promoting? Isn't that an environmental pressure that promotes?
I don't think we would be able to regulate or do much about that. And I don't think that throwing them in prison cells would necessarily be the best idea. However, I do like the don't ask, don't tell policy that the military instituted. I don't see any particularly a big deal or bad problem with that at all.
So what you just did was countered every objection you had to me supporting.
Well, that's what you're saying, but I don't think I did at all.
Please let me finish, right? And so the reason was you said, oh, no matter what, you can't support gay marriage because if you do, that's an environmental pressure that could allow the people to more people becoming gay. Wouldn't the same be true of people having gay sex?
Yeah, well, we wouldn't be promoting it at that point, so no, it wouldn't be the same.
Okay, we're promoting it by not having it be illegal.
No, you're not promoting it by decriminalizing it. That's not a promotion of it.
So you're for gay people could have sex, right? Are gay people that are openly gay, should they be allowed on television if they're not talking about gay issues?
I don't know. Maybe, yeah. Maybe it would be best to regulate the behavior out as best that we possibly could for the societal good. I don't see a huge problem with that, no.
So George Takei, who, by the way, I hate politically, but George Takei, not on Star Trek because he sounds effeminate and everyone knows that he's gay.
I mean, I don't know that we should necessarily regulate that at the policy level, but I think that we could maybe regulate that on a societal level, yes. But the first step to regulating that at a societal level would be to essentially promote heterosexual family units. And then what you would end up with, generally speaking, throughout the quantum of society is that they would lean towards that, and those types of problems would go away on their own anyhow. This is what the historic record has shown us anyway.
So I just find this to me, this is just, you say that you feel that I'm shilling for the left. That's what I feel you're doing. You're shilling for big government. Right. Here's how, because you're saying that government should get involved in culture and be massively overreaching to the point where we literally discourage.
Wait a second. Government should be involved in culture. Why shouldn't they be involved in culture?
I want people to have freedom and be able as adults to make decisions that they want, even if those
you want freedom. You want freedom to a degree, but you don't want ultimate freedom. That would be absurd.
Well, that's true. But so we have to, so we both say we don't want no freedom or total freedom.
Right.
Agreed. Right. Well, I think that your position is far beyond the line into encroaching to where big government is getting in directions that they shouldn't. When you're literally saying that we should have cultural and government programs.
So what we should do.
Just please let me finish. You're saying that we should have these programs to literally discourage people that just happen to be gay, but aren't talking about gay issues from even appearing on things like television.
Yeah, I don't see a big problem with the government promoting the family unit and heterosexual activity at all. I don't see a problem with that at all. And I think that when I'm talking about societal changes, that would create those same types of changes that I'm talking about. That's why I don't see it as being necessary at the policy level. What happened with gay marriage was that it was contrary to what public opinion was, and it was done via the Supreme Court at a policy level. And that wasn't correct. That shouldn't have been done that way, period.
Well, legally, I think this is different than something like abortion, right? Because I think that the institution of marriage, right? I don't think that there's a legal claim to say that we could discriminate consenting adults based on marriage. I don't think that it should exist. So I think the court's right to interpret it. However, strategically, you're right that it shouldn't be left up to the courts. They should just pass a damn amendment that says marriage is between two consenting adults, period. That's what it should be.
Well,
right. But that's what it should be. Nonetheless, that's kind of a red herring from the discussion we're having.
So then you do want the government to interfere in cultural issues.
It has nothing to do with interference. If the government's going to be in the business of marriage, they don't have the right to discriminate against people based on who they want to marry.
I see. So right now, the court made this ruling for gay marriage and you support it. So therefore, the court, via activist judges, were able to put this in place and you support that.
I support the fact that if the government's going to be involved in the business of marriage, that they are not allowed to discriminate based on who you want to marry if you're consenting adults.
Why not?
Because
can you marry your cousin?
No.
Okay, well then you do. So that's that.
But the issue is different, right? Conflating homosexuality with incest is completely different.
Right? Because we understand different because we were discussing whether or not the government can involve itself in policy making between two consenting adults, and clearly you think they can. And so
there are limits. That's true. Yeah. There are limits.
Clearly you think that they can, and I think that they can too, and I don't see any particular problem.
Right, but the question is, where should that limit be? The limit should be as small as possible, right?
Okay,
the
limit
should be,
not necessarily.
We don't allow family members to marry.
Not necessarily.
We don't allow family members to marry. And there's even a question, like certainly you could never accept it for all sorts of reasons. People marrying.
I don't know if Rob should have pivoted.
And there's no particular reason that you need to accept that
probably should just bit the bullet
inside the
institution.
Either.
We don't have the right to discriminate. Right, you have no reason to
discriminate against family members marrying.
The problem is when you're talking about discrimination and reasons for or not discriminating, the impetus is on the person actively pushing for the discrimination to discuss why that discrimination is necessary. You saying prove to me why we shouldn't discriminate is a red herring.
I'm not asking you to prove why we shouldn't discriminate.
Right. So then prove why we should discriminate.
Wait, hold on. We got to let him Andrew finish as well.
I'm talking about whether or not the government should be able to, at a policy level, intervene and promote what's good for society. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I simply used an example of incest as being an example of them intervening in policy of marriage, and you agreed that that was probably fine. I still think hang on. I also think that it's completely appropriate for them to intervene in all type of marital arrangements that aren't good for the general population. Another example of that might be multiple wives and polygamy. I think that they should be able to intervene on that and say, no, you can't have multiple wives.
Okay. Do you think there were people that made the argument that interracial marriage would be bad for society?
Sure.
Did the government have the right to intervene and say that people shouldn't be allowed to marry interracially?
I think that the government had as much right to intervene and say that as they had a right to intervene and say no, which they did.
Right. So as you can see, like this is
you say he must have at this point like smoked like a whole pack. He's really puffing down those cigarettes. You know what? I will say though, I do want more far right-wing people to smoke. So I'm happy he's encouraging that in his audience.
On the welfare of the people, and they decided that they would promote that. I think that that's fine that they can do that, just like I think that they can discriminate at a marriage level for all different types of reasons. I don't see a big problem with that at all. And neither do you.
Okay.
Neither do you.
No, I do have a problem, right? Because here's the argument. Like, if they would have said, if the people in charge of society at the time, and certainly this has been true in the history of the United States, would have said that interracial marriage was a net loss for society, it would be bad for society. I don't think they should have had the right to say, well, we've came to the conclusion that interracial marriage would be bad for society, therefore we will outlaw it. I don't think they have that right.
Why not? They just have the right to regulate it. They just have the right to regulate it in every other response. I don't understand.
That's why the only response that we've articulated are things like polygamy and incest.
For instance, if for some reason they were able to prove that the promotion of interracial marriage would have caused innumerable amounts of harm, for some odd reason they were able to prove that beyond some reasonable doubt, okay, and the government came in and regulated it, I would understand why the government would come in and regulate it. Do I think that the government can come in and regulate marriage? I do, for all types of different reasons, including the cases of incest, including cases of polygamy, including all types of different cases that I haven't even thought about.
Do I want right-wing people to smoke? Not all right-wing people, just like people like BigPapaFascist, though. Probably yes. I would like to see them continue to smoke. I hope he engages in that a little bit more.
Homosexual marriage and I don't see any good reason.
I hope
to have
local liquor
homosexual
stores
marriage.
give
I
them a
just
discount,
don't see
actually.
why we need to have it at all. There doesn't seem to be a big cause for it. It seems that if you're in agreement that there's environmental factors creating homosexual activity, that you would likely be against it.
Again, so you're the one who started conflating. You conflated it with incest in the first place, right? So the issue is what we're talking about is like neither of us believe in total freedom or total authoritarianism. Both of us believe that there's a sliding scale, and we're asking the question, where do we draw the line? I'm saying that I draw the line that I think that consenting adults without, you know, extenuating circumstances like incest and things like that should be allowed to marry whoever they want if the government's in the business of marriage. You say, what about incest? I say, what about interracial marriage? So for you to act like somehow that it's bad form for me to take this to the logical, I'm not saying it's bad you're form. Pushing on one end.
I'm not saying it's bad form. I'm just saying that in the case of interracial marriage, right? At the time when the government involved itself and said that you couldn't marry, for instance, if you're white, you couldn't marry a black person. I can at least understand why it is that the government wanted to regulate the marriages based on the will of the people. Yes, of course, I understand that. Okay. That doesn't mean that I can morally conflate it and say it was correct, because I can't. Okay. But what I can say in this particular case is that it's not morally correct. And I can also say that if you believe that environmental factors lead to homosexual activity, that you probably wouldn't want to produce more of them.
Okay, so again, what we see is, I guess what I would say is a small government conservative, unlike a big government conservative like you apparently are. I have a healthy distrust of authority in the government. I don't want to put the power in the government's hands to say, if they could articulate a case to us why something is bad for society, then they should be allowed to make it illegal. We're about to see, for example, and I know this is a different issue, but you'll see where this leads to. We're about to see all sorts of commissions and investigations on people that are Trump supporters and conservatives, and they'll make the argument, well, this is good for society, so we have to root out this type of free speech, because the government has the right for what's good for society to go in and take away people's rights and liberties. And so forth, they'll make the case that, we could see that the majority of problems in this country, we think we're making the case that white supremacy and Trump supporters and QAnon and people like that, they're the major problem with this country. Therefore, we're justified in going in and making sure these people can't have speech on platforms and things like that. And you would say, well, explain to me why they don't have the right to do with that if they're making the case that's good for society.
Let's back up to the bifurcation that you made, that you're small government and I'm large government. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can still have a small government and regulate marriage. It's absurd to say you can't. I don't even understand where you came up with that. Explain how you came up with that. Why do you need to have large government in order to regulate marriage? I'm not sure why.
Well, it's not just the regulating marriage, but that's certainly part of it. It's a bigger government. Who you spend the rest of your life to, and who you're in love with, and who you get married to and engage in matrimony is certainly
right now. If you're going to get married, you have to get
please let me finish. Let me finish. So it's certainly an important part to individuals' lives, right? And the government stepping in and saying, no, as consenting adults, you don't have the right to engage in this sort of relationships is absolute nonsense. To the point where you're actually, and again, like, I'm not saying in some abstract sense that what you're, that someone could take the positions you're talking about and lead to bigger government. You're making that claim yourself. You're going so far as to, yes, you are. You're going so far as to say the government should literally be promoting, not allowing people that happen to be gay but aren't talking about gay issues on television.
Wouldn't increase the size of government, Rob.
It would increase. I'm not talking about size of government in the idea of how many governmental employees we have. I'm talking about size of government in the power the government has over the choices and liberty of human beings.
There's some powers we want the government to have, though.
That's true. And I think that you're going way too far. Again,
I think you're not going far enough.
Well, that's fair, but you're certainly a fan of bigger government than me, and the government that you're advocating.
Explain to me.
So explain to me again. Explain just real quick. Explain to me how the position you're saying that if it's good for society, that the government should be allowed to do it if they can make a case it's good for society. Mm-hmm. If the government comes out and makes the case that Trump supporters shouldn't be allowed to speak online, why shouldn't they be allowed to take
this whole conversation? Can be avoided if we just brought up the fact in here that
fine, right?
a lot of homosexuals are produced through biological factors, and that's what the science points to. The environmental factors could play a part. That's what scientists are saying as well. But when it comes to hormones and stuff that people are exposed to while in the womb, or we could look at homosexual traits within basically all mammals, like biological, unless you think, I guess, like the lions are grooming other lions, then obviously there's something else going on there.
You can put on homosexual Blues Clues, where a transgender sings all kinds of songs about them, okay? That same exact funding can be used to promote heteronormative families. I don't see why that would be a big problem, nor do I see why that would increase the size of government. Right?
But that's different than the
when
things.
We're talking, let me finish and I'll kick it back over. Same thing when we're talking about marriage. The issuance of marriage certificates is done generally at the local level by your county, and a county just simply denies you if you're trying to marry with somebody else who's a biological male. I don't see how that would increase the size of government either. Now, you could maybe make the claim that it was more invasive. That might be true, but in that particular case, I think that it's okay for the government to be somewhat more invasive.
The idea that it doesn't increase the size of government, you clearly realize that that's garbage. It does, right? It doesn't increase the size per se of the individuals that we would hire in the government, but it certainly increases the government's power to have influence over your life.
That's not increasing its size.
Again, okay,
it's just its scope.
Right. So it increases the strength and the government's authority over individuals, right? The idea that you're saying I'm bifurcating this response when I'm taking this to the obvious conclusion. Again, you keep conflating things, right? I'm not disagreeing with you. Please, I'm not disagreeing with you on a lot of the things you said. I think that anytime we're promoting any form of sexuality to children, it's a huge mistake. I have no problem, for example, if children programming wants to say some people have two dads or some people have two moms, no problem. There is clearly a movement in this country to hypersexualize children. We should not be talking about sex and saying that, children on Blue's Clues, or I don't know what this Blue's Clues episode said. I have to be honest. But if it said something that you could be sexually attracted to, I don't think we should be telling children about sexual attraction one way or another.
That's not what it said.
Oh, okay, I have no clue. I'm just saying, I'm giving you my stance, right? I don't have a problem if Blue's Clues said you could have two dads. I don't have a problem with it at all.
I know.
Right? So I don't know exactly. So I'm not disagreeing with you that I think I see all sorts in society that's hypersexualizing children. And it's doing so in the name of political positions, I think, that are tied to the LGBT community. That's different than whether or not people that are gay should be allowed to get married. Right? That's the issue. That's where we started with this issue.
So
and when you talk about how this is real quick, when you talk about how this is some sort of bifurcation, it's not, because the rationale you're giving, again, what we're saying, you're right. There's no constitutional amendment that says that you have the right to marriage or to gay marriage or something like that. But what we understand through the thrust of what the Constitution was saying is the government does not have the right to discriminate on people based on arbitrary factors. We only allow the government to discriminate based on things that we think are very severe. So you have to articulate why the government should be allowed to discriminate, right? And you saying, well, you don't have a constitutional right to gay marriage. Any law, like for example, if we pass a law that says you can't smoke weed, the implication is you can't say, unless you're straight, then you can't smoke weed, right? We would say, no. You can't do that. The law is the law. That's the same with marriage. If we have a law that says, and all's marriage is, the legal ramifications of it just have to do with the economic reality and other things, like, for example...
No, it's not just what marriage is.
Well, right. That's in the government's role in it. That's what it is. Right?
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care necessarily and specifically about just the government's role in marriage. What we're talking about is the production of a moral society. So if I were to ask you this in reverse then, and just ask you if there was any evidence at all that gay marriage produced more homosexuals, would you still be for it?
Yes.
Okay, then that's all we really needed to establish.
Okay, but if there's any evidence that interracial marriage actually led to the increase of LGBT marriage, would you be against interracial marriage then?
I have no idea.
What do you mean? It seems clear cut. That's what the implication you're making with me.
If I would at that point, because you're making a bifurcation.
Again, you keep saying bifurcation. You talk about these hypothetical. If hypothetically we saw that gay marriage increased the amount of people that ended up being LGBT, you say, well, that's enough. Because it seems to me that your sole promotion, or the argument that you're putting highest above all value, is we need to stop the incentive for people to be gay. Correct? Yeah. Okay, so then it wouldn't matter what the issue is if it's something that's seemingly unrelated. But
okay, right, so then in your world, if interracial marriage created more homosexuals, then yeah, I'll concede that the government would then have to step in order to stop the if that was proven to be a contributing factor.
Holy absolutely. Shit! Holy cow! I mean, this is now. Does everyone see what I talked about this?
Why is
leading
that
to big government?
Why is that problematic for you within a hypothetical?
Because the government could, do you implicitly trust everything the government says?
Yo, man, in this world, BigPapaFascist would be like sending the best SS squad after me, man, because not only am I gay, but I only date black people because I live in a predominantly black county, so I'm...
Okay, so literally saying
That'd
that
be
we should
fucked.
unquestionably give government the power to ban things such as interracial marriage if they could make a case that somehow would lead to an increase. That's how much you hate homosexuality. That you would say, no, even people that are white married to black people, they have to dissolve their marriage because the government made the case that led to more gay people. This seems to be a hatred of gay people that is, it's mind-blowing to me.
Good point. Let's try this again. Okay, when we're talking about this, the people didn't have a say in gay marriage, did they?
Well, they had some say, but much like most policies, they didn't have a say. Almost all policies, the government says
they had a say. They had a say at the state level, and what did they reject? They rejected it overwhelmingly at the state level.
That's true.
Movements were growing in support, but also remember, you elect presidents who then appoint judges, so you do have a representative say in that way. What I'm talking about is in this particular case, when we're talking about gay marriage, that this was arbitrarily ruled as being something that was okay based on an amendment that was never tailored for homosexuals at all. It has nothing to do with me hating homosexuals or not hating homosexuals. Okay, I'm just trying to be logically consistent. You can make outlandish hypotheticals that I'm forced to agree with. There's nothing that I can do about that. Okay. But I am going to be logically consistent always and say that I think that the government's role in promotion of the family is fine. And I don't think that it's going to create an out of control government. I've only ever seen the slippery slope go the other direction. I've never seen the slippery slope go this direction. So if we say no gay marriage, I don't think that we're going to suddenly arbitrarily start saying no this, no that. That hasn't been the trend. The trend's been the opposite way. The trend has always seemed to be that once we allow gay marriage, then we get into trans-focused groups, and then we get into furries, and it inevitably leads, I think, to pedophilia. Furries?
What's a furry?
Go ahead, Brady. Sorry.
What's a furry? Because I keep hearing this mentioned. What is a furry? Somebody tell me.
Furries. I'm not the person to answer this, but a furry is someone that dresses up like humanoid.
Does he think the next step after so it's gays?
The implication most of the time
then
is
furries,
sexual attractiveness.
then pedophilia.
People dressed up like bunnies and horses.
That's the jumps.
And then, I guess the implication is many times that they're having sex. I don't think dressing as a furry necessarily means that you're sexual, but there's certainly a community that is the case. But again, so the point that we're trying to make.
How many furry civil rights groups are there?
See how your position. You could say these are ridiculous hypotheticals and this would never happen, but you're conceding that the government does nefarious shit all the time. We can
Look,
it is not unreasonable to think through the very rationale that you're giving that if the government deems it's good for society, then they should be allowed to intervene even in what consenting adults do to such a degree.
To a degree, you're correct.
Well, sure, we say in a very limited sense.
The only thing that we can do to safeguard that would be the Second Amendment, and that's it. But I do think that the government absolutely should have a role in the institution of who can be married and who can't be married based on the will of the public.
Also, it's really weird for him to say he's trying to have pro-family policies, but he's literally trying to block families from forming by stopping people from getting married.
I think that it's certainly true at this point at a national level.
Your best
argument I think your best argument would be, well, the reason that that's true at the national level is because of the cultural influence that we've put on it.
I mean, you think so too, don't you?
I mean, I think that that's part of it, but I think even okay, but I don't think that I don't know, even if you would come out and start promoting actively against gay marriage, I don't know. I think it would take a long, long time for the vast consensus of people in this country to then be against gay marriage. I think that most people, I'm just guessing, and you could disagree with this, but I think most people would adapt more of my position, which would be like, look, this is an issue where consenting adults should be allowed to get married. If they're in a loving relationship, we should have no reason to tell them that they can't get the benefits of marriage that comes through with state-sanctioned marriage. There's no reason to do that. And so despite what the debate will be on what culture is promoting, whether anti-LGBT issues or pro-LGBT issues, I think the majority of people will say that we think that gay marriage should be allowed to exist. Even people that think that homosexuality is a sin, you're starting to see more and more people say, but there's a separation of church and state, and that, we think that gay people should be allowed to get married.
Okay, Rob.
And that's so certainly.
What if you put it on the state level via the 10th?
There might be. You could theoretically see a state that would try to ban gay marriage, but what do they do then? Like, so if
they did it before. There were states before that had gay marriage and states that did not.
Okay, so if Dylan and I decide, if I split up with my wife and Dylan and I decide to get married, and we live in Arkansas and they ban gay marriage, and I go to New York and get married, right? Is Arkansas then recognize my marriage?
No, it wouldn't.
So I think that that's a mistake, even though I'm
Well,
for
okay,
federalism.
you think that the 10th Amendment then is a mistake?
No, I think that when it comes to things like,
if you don't think it's within the federal purview, which is what you're saying, you don't think marriage should be involved in the federal purview of the federal government, then you would logically have to leave it up to the states like it was before, right?
Yeah, I don't even think the state should be involved in it, but that's true. I don't disagree. Just thinking about this for the first time, you're probably right. It probably would
let Rob
be the
store my
individual states
capital.
that say we don't recognize this marriage, but still, it's irrelevant to the point that.
So why do you advocate then?
Can you give me 1 second? My computer's dying. I forgot to plug it in. Just 1 second. I'm sorry.
Man, this guy can talk fast.
Yeah, I'm bored with it now, and I've got other shit to do. So
All right, so we'll kind of wind this down. We did have 2 super chats that I could just read really quick from Children's of Gay Parents. I don't know, that's not the person. Oh, Joe R. Children's of gay parents are more likely to be gay. Also worth pointing out that the Blues Clues clip and the map flag, amongst other queer flags. I don't know. And then we have from Intellectual Midget. I'll have to disagree with all being environmental, but there isn't evidence of it being biological. Environment provides an incentive to not control our deviant impulses. Ask them to elaborate on this.
I mean, that's wrong, but
No, I mean the point is, right? There is no, again, if this is true, then there would have never, how did gay people come into creation in the first place if it's purely environmental? You can't get around that argument. You can't get around that.
because somebody somewhere thought it up one day.
Well, how did they think it up?
I have no idea.
Right. So the idea, like, again, the default position, I don't disagree that environmental has a factor, a big factor.
And why do you want to keep contributing? That's the thing that just gets me. It's like, why do you want to keep contributing to it then?
But listen, the whole conversation we didn't have the conversation that you had with Dylan. I've talked about how I think that the over-sexualization of children and things like that is a mistake. I don't have a problem with promoting that we should be kind and we should not discriminate against people that happen to be gay or trans or something like that. You could have 2 fathers, that sort of stuff. I do know that I've seen children's shows and other things that have gone way further than that. I've been involved in debates where people went way further. I was involved in a debate on a panel where we were talking about, should we teach transsexual issues in puberty classes or like in health classes in high school? And I was like, I think you should teach safe sex. You could say, here's the types of sex you have. You could have vaginal intercourse, anal intercourse, oral, etc. Here's how to be safe. You don't have to then stipulate a man could do this with a man, a woman could do this with a woman. That I don't think you should stipulate. There were literally people on that panel that said, not only should we stipulate, but we should teach people how to have good sex. We should teach these kids, if you have sex with a man, here's how to do it well. That shit's insane. And there are people that believe that. I don't disagree with you. A lot of, now, on the specifics, I didn't hear the whole debate you had with Dylan, so I don't know what specifically was said. But I do agree that there is this promotion of sexual issues to children that is immoral and it's devastating. And I think particularly when we see with trans issues, I absolutely think that the vast rise we see in trans issues, like, you're just a fool if you don't think that if you're born with parents that are highly advocate of trans issues, and then it just so happens you're one of the few that become trans, that your parents' promotion of that idea didn't have something to do with it.
Well, let's get them married as fast as possible because we don't want the government to interfere.
So do you think trans people shouldn't be allowed to be married?
Of course.
I mean, these
are mentally ill people, clearly.
So mentally ill people shouldn't be allowed to get married.
I don't think that they can make an arbitration of choice to be married. If you're so mentally ill that you can't distinguish between what's male and female, why in the world do you think that you have a capacity in your mind to decide to be married or not married?
It's absurd. Like, the authoritarianism.
I think it is absurd. I agree. It's not.
For example, my job, I deal with people with
authoritarianism.
Please. It is. My job is I deal with people with developmental disabilities. Some of the greatest moments that's happened when some of these people that were born with autism, Down syndrome, other developmental disabilities actually get boyfriends or girlfriends or loved ones. And I've even had one situation, not someone I personally worked with, but where people got married. The fact that you would say, oh, well, cognitively, they don't have the ability to love or to get married or something. Like, this is insane. It's just
not insane.
Like,
don't you agree that there are people who can't cognitively, like, for instance, if you have a man who has an average IQ and you have a woman who's mentally retarded, do you think that if she's attractive that he should be able to marry her and that she can consent to that? Of course not.
Ask JF.
It's
of course
different.
not. It's ridiculous.
Different because
No,
you're assuming that
we're
people,
talking about cognitive reality.
No, you're assuming that people that are trans are then in the same category we would put with people with IQ levels that would make them developmentally disabled.
No, I think that people that are trans are so mentally disturbed and mentally ill that they cannot distinguish at this point the difference between men and women. So they can't make reality-based decisions that are cognitive. And people like this used to be locked up in treatment facilities to get treated.
I mean, again, so what I'll say is, like, you think that because you take the hardest stance on this, that anyone that doesn't take the stance that you're taking on it must be shilling for the left or something like that. That's absurd. There are not mutually exclusive things that we can't promote, like families and things like that. I would go so far as to say, and one of the arguments I have for gay marriage is this: shouldn't we, even if you think that homosexuality is bad, don't you think that we should promote monogamy over like promiscuity? And so gay marriage would be a step in that direction. And we have so many kids right now that are lingering in terrible foster care systems.
Gay marriage
if we have two
people
people that are married and are loving, I don't give a shit if they're same sex or not. If they want, please let me finish. I don't give a shit if they're same sex or not. Their environment's going to be better for that child than an environment of being in foster care. That doesn't mean that I do think that right now, based on the evidence we have, that the best environment on average for a child to grow up in is probably a two-parent household of marriage where you have a man and a woman. We could promote stable families and things like that without demonizing people that are gay and want to get married and things like that. I just think that you're going way too far.
Promoting it.
I think that the central core of what you're saying is something I believe in, that we should promote healthy families and things like that.
But wait, that's going to make the government
part of that
big.
Is demonizing.
That's going to make the government too big.
Please, just real quick, the part that I disagree is like all of the extreme, like trans people shouldn't be allowed to get married, gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married. This is nonsense. I don't like. I value personal freedom and liberty. I don't want the government saying we've made judgments for what's good with society, and so we're going to intervene so massively on this level that we say we don't think you're intelligent enough to get married. Like, that's insane shit to me.
It's not insane to tell somebody who can't cognitively distinguish between a man and a woman that they can't cognitively make a tie for the rest of their lives in the eyes of the state. It's taking advantage of people, just like you would be a person with an average IQ taking advantage of a person with a low IQ. I cannot distinguish between the two, and I don't think it's a good idea to give people who are diagnosed mentally ill people the right to just arbitrarily go get married.
How about bipolar people?
Has value.
How about bipolar people?
What about them?
Should they be allowed to get married? They have a mental illness.
Degrees to mental illness.
If
you're severely bipolar, maybe that should be looked at. Sure.
I mean, this is crazy. It's just. I mean, this is so crazy.
Well, it's crazy.
You would think that a conservative would understand.
I don't think it's crazy to say that people who suffer from massive cognitive dissonance can't just arbitrarily go marry whoever the fuck they want to go marry. I don't think that they have the mental capacity to make those types of decisions. They're mentally ill, Rob.
It doesn't matter. We allow mentally ill people to have human rights.
I'm not saying you take away their human rights. That's not what I'm discussing here. I'm talking about the institution of marriage. And I don't think it's insane at all. I think that you just don't want to back off on the position of gay marriage, and that's fine. Okay, but I'm not going to suddenly cuck to it and say, "Hey, gay marriage is swell," because we want to maximize freedom.
I'm not saying you're a cuck. We're talking about two different value systems that we have, right? Yeah. I think that especially, and I'm saying that your value system, I don't understand how it cognitively makes sense in your world. For example, if you could understand the impetus for the government to be authoritarian and abuse powers that we give to them, and the ability, like we see them in real time trying to take away people's First Amendment and things like that. There aren't safeguards. You admitted that it's happening now.
It can happen now, and there's a safeguard for that, whether we've used it or not. There is a safeguard for it.
So why would we massively then increase the government's ability to say, well, now we could get involved even in the institution of marriage in this way. Now we could get involved in all of these other institutions.
The government's primary job is to promote the health and general welfare of the United States via the Constitution. You're not giving them significant power that they're not constitutionally enabled to have at all. That's literally their fucking job. Now, what their job isn't to do, their job isn't to borrow extreme amounts of money from the Federal Reserve, for instance. Their job is to coin money. That's their fucking job. Okay? When I'm talking about their job, when I'm talking about what they're supposed to be doing, The promotion of the health and general welfare of the United States is part of that. And part of the health of the United States, due to our low birth rate problem right now, should significantly be tailored towards having some type of nuclear extended family and in which pro-growth society is promoted, period. And what you do when you cheapen the institution of marriage and you make it something that's just some type of weird binding contract between two people for who gets whose shit when they die, I think that that's fucking stupid. And I don't think it's good long-term for anybody. And I think that there's more to marriage than that if you're trying to promote a sane society, Rob.
Wait.
You're
okay.
going.
I have a question. So, if that's the case, then why don't you just make it so we promote artificial insemination at higher rates for gay couples so they could be part of that pro-growth society? And secondary, if you care so much about marriage, shouldn't it be brought up the fact that gay men actually have lower divorce rates than heterosexual people? Almost like gay people actually respect marriage, the institution of marriage, more than heterosexuals?
Did you just say that gays have lower rates of divorce?
Gay men have a lower rates of divorce than heterosexual, yes.
You mean per capita or overall?
Overall.
They have overall
and per capita, both.
Okay, and how many more heterosexuals get married than homosexuals?
Like statistically, like a lot more, but it's percentages.
I mean,
percentages
just per capita.
It's like
we can do it per capita.
The study comparison, I think, was like 18% to 15%. It was a study in, I think it was 2005.
So then it would likely make sense then that they got divorced at a higher rate then, wouldn't it? Because they get married at a higher rate.
So intellectual...
No, now that's of the people who got married, or gay people, less gay people, gay men got divorced.
Okay, but
so your thing is they get...
Per capita, what I'm asking
No. I didn't say per capita. That's the percentage of divorce.
So that's why I'm bringing up per capita, because that's how you get these ratios correct.
Okay, buddy. Okay.
So
I don't know this.
Hold on, really quick. So, because we're gonna start winding it down a little bit, but from Intellectual Midget, he said it should be discouraged and demonized while promoting heterosexual marriage. Also, there's more nuance than nature versus nurture argument. Ask them all. I don't know what he means by that. Ask them all. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Well, I think what he's saying is that there's a lot of people that think that the nature portion far over exceeds the nurture portion. And then there's people who think exactly the opposite. As Dylan stated, right, doesn't know. You can't really know which factor is the most primary. All I can do is indicate the evidence that's right in front of me to tell you what I see in real time. I can't do any more than that. I can look at hypotheticals that are interesting, like Rob brings up, and say, where'd the first gay person come from? I have no idea. But that doesn't mean that they were biologically tuned for that either. And Rob didn't even make the case that they were. It's an interesting, logical thing to look at, right? But we don't really know what the answer to that is. What we can see, though, again, is that in real time, if you're saying that there are environmental factors for these things, which I agree that there are, then likely the best thing that we could be doing is not promoting those environmental factors. That's my position.
I don't understand what, like, people saying that it should be demonized and we should promote. I disagree with that. I don't think that we should demonize. We could literally see real harm. I don't understand. What do you mean by demonize? Right? So we should bully people that are gay? Is that what you mean by demonize? Like, I'm not saying that you're saying this, but the person who said this, you're talking about homosexuality due to biology when I said nature versus nurture. Right. So I don't understand. I think that it's not mutually exclusive, that you could promote family structures and things like that without demonizing other things, right? And the idea that it's more complex than nature versus nurture, of course it's complex, right? But the argument is that Andrew is making the point, if you can't prove that it's biological, then we should put as our highest value of society doing everything we can, no matter how extreme, no matter how infringing on people's rights, if we could say that it's a net benefit to taking down the environmental pressures that come with being LGBT. I vehemently disagree with that.
Well, that's a miscategory. You're taking what I said and you're not categorizing it correctly. You're not really stating it correctly. What I'm saying is that while none of us can agree how much of a biological factor it is, it could be 0%. What we can see is that there's at least some correlation between the causative effects of environment and being homosexual due to the increase of homosexuals via correlating at the same time with mass media intake. That's my position on it. But
you go further than that. You clearly go further. You put that the highest value we could have as a society is to discourage those environmental pressures, no matter what they may be.
Well, no, you don't need to discourage them. You just encourage the other ones, and then
that's different. That's different than what you've been saying.
No, it's not different than what I've been saying.
For example,
the government's job is to promote heteronormative relationships. Far different than saying that you have to demonize homosexuality.
You literally said that we should, as a society and perhaps as a government, if someone happens to be gay, but they're not discussing gay issues on television, maybe we should make sure they're not on TV.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thought exercise, but I would have to look at that a little bit more closely. Just because you can pin a question using debate tactics like that are interesting, okay? And I have to try to be as logically consistent as I possibly can be on it. That doesn't mean that all issues are going to be equal ever, okay? And I don't think that we're talking about this in a way that's really equal or that's applicable. I think it's interesting, but I don't necessarily agree that it's applicable.
But again, just real quick, because I know there's a question. I'll just say this real quick. The problem is that's exactly the position that I have. The position I have is that the adults' right to consent to marry who they want outweighs, in this particular instance, the idea of your value of we should not promote environment. And you say, no, we should do everything we can not to. So when you say, well, these interests. Right. These interesting hypotheticals, what I'm doing is saying, how far are you willing to take this? Because it seems to me, if I push you far enough, you would say, yes, at some point, there are other values that we would say take precedent over not promoting environmental.
And I could, and
we disagree on where that sliding scale is.
I could possibly state that that's true. Yeah. But what I'm saying, that's my point. But what I'm saying is that if you're talking about maximums versus minimums, and you can take everything to an absurdity in the extreme, and you can take everything to an absurdity in the minimum. That's absolutely true. I'm not trying to take anything to an absurdity. We had a status quo for many, many, many years, almost since the inception of the nation, that homosexuality was not promoted, and most certainly people weren't allowed to be married, and we seem to survive and thrive just fine. So I don't really understand why you think that the state is just suddenly going to become out of control because they say gays can't get married when people never even had a right to vote on it in the first place.
Well, because we could see the state's authoritarian creeping in all over the place. And I'll just say this real quick because I know the audience wants these questions answered. And I'll also say that what I'm saying is that the values I put over personal choice and people to be able to marry who they want if the government's going to be involved in the business of marriage outweighs the nebulous cost of environmental pressures to end homosexuality because it's because hypothetically it's bad for society, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I see the tangible. We are where we're at. The homosexuals were able to get marriage done. Their infrastructure did not go away. It was simply co-opted for new absurdities, like the trans absurdity. That's just true. I don't know what else to tell you. There's a lot of transgenders that aren't even homosexual, and yet they're included in LGBTQ. They've literally taken the entire infrastructure. They've done it in real time. I don't know what else to tell you.
So you say that I can't make a slippery slope argument as to the dangers that could come as a result of the positions you want. But so the reasonable thing to do would say we decide on this line where we think things are acceptable and where we're not. And you're saying, no. We have to reject anything. But if we say that because we think that the status quo is something that we don't like.
No,
I'll answer the question.
What I said was I've only ever seen the slippery slope happen on the left side. I haven't seen it happen yet from the right when it comes to these social issues. Not yet. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. I just haven't seen it in real time. And I have seen it in real time in my life with the left.
We've seen the slippery slope of invading people's rights from both left and right-wing governments in this country. It might not be on the issue of LGBT and things like that, but we've certainly seen it in
talking about specifically social issues.
But we see with social issues, such as, for example, drug legalization. That's a social issue.
That's not a right-wing position.
Sure it is.
No, it's not.
We've seen plenty right-wing politicians heavily push for the war on drugs.
It's not a right-wing position to say the drug legalization was not a right-wing position. I don't know what else to tell you. It just wasn't.
No. Drug criminalization.
Yeah, drug criminalization was.
Okay, that's my point. That's a social issue.
That's not overreaching, and it's
sure.
No, it's not overreaching.
Sure, we could see that when we allow people to get involved in right-wing when we allow people to get involved in social issues, more government intervention in social issues, that it's escalated to getting involved in other issues. Like, for example, we could see in the name of good health, we had like, well, you can't take drugs. Now we see certain politicians that are saying you can't drink big gulps. You can't have trans fats.
Not on the right.
Now we see a push.
Not on the right.
What do you mean not in the right? What it's irrelevant whether it's on the left or the right.
That's my whole
the government
point,
is made up of
when I say I've only seen the paradigm happen with social issues on the left on the slippery slope in real time, this is what I'm talking about. When you point to things like, well, what about drug criminalization coming from the right? I don't think that's a slippery slope. And I think
privacy is a social issue.
Those are things that have been regulated traditionally in this country forever.
Do you think privacy is a social issue? Do you think privacy is a social issue?
To a degree, yeah.
Okay, you don't think the right pushed the Patriot Act?
I think the right did push the Patriot Act.
Okay.
I do think but I also think that the left pushed the Patriot Act a lot.
I agree with that as well. That's why I'm not making it a left-right. I'm not making it a left-right issue. Just real quick, I'm not making it a left-right issue. I'm saying that when we give the power
paradigm of the right, I haven't seen the same slippery slope. I don't know what else to tell you about. I haven't seen it.
Right, you're admitting that we see an issue on the right. I'm not differentiating from the left and right.
No, you saw a combination of the left and right. You saw a combination of the left and right, but you didn't see the right.
Again, like you could, I understand, like that you don't want to let me finish my point, but what I'm saying is I'm not differentiating from the left or the right. I'm saying that I think that the authoritarians in government, regardless of which side of the ledger they claim to be on, we've seen the slippery slope into social issues and other issues when we give them power to intervene for the societal good, how they end up using that as an excuse in bad ways to take our rights away.
So Q&A.
Yeah, let's do some of these questions. Go ahead, Rob. This is from Base Homeschool Mom, which is Mrs. Papa Fascist. What is his position on LGBTQ in children's programming?
I think so. By the way, Big Papa Fascist, this might interest you. There's a person in my area that I've dealt with. His name's Tony. Maybe I shouldn't say his name. There's a person in Lycoming County that there's a big national story because he publicly criticized in his local town that the library was promoting children's books that were pro-LGBTQ, and he was citing specific passages in there that were of the sexual nature that he disagreed with, which I would agree with the sexual nature of children's books and things like that being disagreeable, but he's being excoriated because he's being told, "Oh, you're bashing, gay kids." I don't think that's what he was doing. But specifically to answer this question, I think that I don't have a problem. As I've already said, anytime that we're promoting sexuality with children, I think that it's a massive problem. Period. I don't care if that like for example, when we're talking about like drag story hour, like the problem isn't that it's a guy in a dress. The problem is if the dress is sexualized. The problem is when it is a movement and it is real, the sexualization of children and things like that. So I don't have a problem if I'm watching Sesame Street with my 5-month-old and Sesame Street says there are many types of families. There could be 2 fathers. There could be 2 mothers. There could be a mother and father. I don't have a problem with that type of programming. I do have a problem with programming that would promote like you could be sexually attracted to a boy or to a girl. That I have a problem with. And I do think that there are tangible effects that we see that will lead to increase. Like you could especially see it in, I think, the trans community, where it's now becoming hip and vogue to tell kids that there's something positive about being trans, and that I think explains the explosion in it. So I'm not totally against. I agree a lot of what Big Papa Fascist is saying here. I just think that we started talking about gay marriage, and that's where the whole thing was. That's a total different conversation, and I think that those people's consenting adults should have the right to get married if they want.
Okay. From Sam Kennedy, Andrew, do you realize that the rhetoric we spew leads to the uprise of LGBTQ youth suicide rates?
Okay.
If I could say, like, that seems like, I'm not going to defend Big Papa Fascist here. I will say this though, like, there are many things that we could say. For example, do you think critical race theory leads to self-harm of people that are told they're racist by the way they were born? Does that mean we shouldn't talk about those things? So, I mean, you could play this game on both sides.
Okay. Let's see here. We've got a bunch of stuff here. Does Big Papa Fascist think libertarians are more cringe than lefties?
In some ways, I do. In some ways, I do think that they're more cringe than lefties. I think that in general, lefties at least understand that there is a need for some type of government infrastructure and that society generally needs to be run. I mean, it just does. There's no 2 ways about that. some of the libertarian philosophy, specifically around the enablement of property rights being the end all be all of all moral decision making, I find to be absurd.
Okay. Intellectual Midget says, wait, so does Rob think that enforcing law and order is also a right-wing issue? Ask him to clarify this.
No. I don't even know how that could be something that would be put. I think that what we see is people that happen to be on the right are the ones that are promoting law and order, but certainly in a left-wing, if it's a fair left-wing society or a fair left-wing ideology.
Well, what I think they're getting at, Rob, with you, and I guess this would be an issue I would have with your stances as well, is that I don't think that just because you say I want a limited state, you can just dismiss morality. Right? You can just dismiss morality and say, because I don't want a limited state. And I think that for some odd reason, you take those two issues and you won't say, look, from a moral standpoint, this is just wrong completely and totally. And I don't want, homosexual marriage. And what you say instead is I want a limited state. But it's like, what about morals, man? We have to have those too.
But the government cannot be the sole arbiter of what is moral. There are extreme situations.
They're not the arbiter of what's moral.
Please let me finish, please. Right. There are limited examples where we can see that the government passes laws based on morality. But the point is that we as a society can decide what's moral or not. That doesn't mean that the government should make things illegal solely because they think in their interpretation at the time that it's immoral. For example, you could think that it's immoral to show violence on television. A lot of people think that that's immoral. That doesn't mean that the government has the right to say, therefore, it is illegal to show any violence on television. It's easy. The founding fathers were clear. I'm not a libertarian, by the way. I don't know if someone was implying that with the question. But the idea is that we should try to maximize freedom. Clearly, there's a role for the state. Clearly, BigPapaFascist is right that the total libertarian does become very cringe. But we should try to restrict that role of the state, particularly on social issues, as much as possible. And as BigPapaFascist says, particularly when it comes to if we are going to have it done, the 10th Amendment says that it should be something that's limited to the states if it's not specifically outlined in the Constitution. So the idea that somehow we need to have the federal government legislating morality saying that we should federally make it illegal for gay people or transsexuals or people with severe bipolar to get married is insane to me.
Okay. From Bendy Brendy. Cool name. Okay, for Andrew, we have observed homosexuality in the animal kingdom. This is obviously absent from human society. How does this not constitute evidence of biologically influenced homosexuality? Can this not apply to humans?
It's interesting because I looked into that. I was curious about it myself. And it turns out through observation that if there's a member of the opposite sex for that animal to have sex with, it'll always, at least on the studies that I looked at of what's observable, choose the opposite sex animal to mate with.
I don't know that that's true.
I don't think it is either. And also, I don't know exactly what study he's putting at. Of course, he's not going to provide it. This is how he works.
You know who that is?
Everything that you've asked.
Oh, yeah. I think meant the person.
But on the fly Q&A to just ask me to produce everything that I've ever seen is ridiculous. I didn't come in prepared to have every study under the sun that might be asked of me to be produced.
From Stardust, should the government assign a boyfriend to wives of infertile men to encourage a traditional family structure? I think that's a joke. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here?
You want the government to provide you with a boyfriend, Stardust?
I have a question. I do have a question, if you don't mind, just real quick. If we get to the point where we have overpopulation in the United States, do you think that it's the role of the government to promote homosexuality then, to lower birth rates?
No.
Why?
Well, I've already told you it's an immoral proposition. But more importantly than that, you wouldn't want to move down the road of promoting same-sex activity. And I didn't conflate the fact that I think it's because there's homosexuals that the birth rate is low. Okay. I use that as a specific example. I don't remember exactly when, But that's not what I was saying at all. I wasn't saying that it's due to gays that the birth rate is low. There's a lot more factors to it than just that.
Well, I know. And I think that if I could just real quick respond to this, I think that there's a lot of conflation. Like, you're arguing your point and you're throwing a lot of things out there. You're saying like, oh, the environmental pressures, and you're saying, oh, well, we should be promoting, we have low birth rates and we should be promoting family structures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think when
true.
it comes down
That's
to
not
if you're on
conflation.
it, but your point at the end of the day is homosexuality is immoral. It shouldn't be promoted.
Yeah, that's my.
Okay, but it makes it much simpler to then have that debate.
That's one of the overarching points. Yes.
Okay, so from JD Hugo or something. Okay, Dylan, how do you think those who advocate anti-LGBT policies should be treated?
Well, those who advocate anti-LGBT policies or spread anti-LGBT hate speech, they are actively seeking policies that will hurt, kill, and maim gay people, whether through higher rates of depression and suicide, whether it be hate crimes and higher rates of lynching, or just a restriction of resources, which happens throughout the world. You look at the regimes of Saudi Arabia, Iran, any of these countries. Those things are countries are literal hellscapes for LGBTQ plus people. And so what I would advocate is that they take note from Big Papa Fascist and smoke more.
Okay.
I advocate the same exact prescription for trans people, interestingly enough.
Well, what the hell is that? Okay. All right. So from Based Homeschool Mom to Rob, who decides what's moral?
Right, great question. Why are you asking me instead of Big Papa Fascist? I think that we should maximize human freedom, and that it's not the government's role or people's role to decide. We've decided that this is moral, and therefore, because we say it's immoral, we will now use the authority of the state that says consenting adults could not engage in this behavior. I think that morality often comes from us as individuals, though as society, we do have some overreaching things because we are beings that interact with each other and are societal, that we have objective things that we deem are beyond the reproach of morality. For example, we think rape's bad, we think murder's bad, etc. But when it comes to sexuality and things like that, it's far looser, right? And we can see that this has moved as time has gone on. Again, I'm not a leftist, but you could see that, like, for example, there are people like Michel Foucault that's done a genealogy of mental illness and about how homosexuality was originally considered a mental illness and then how it's transformed in different societies throughout. So these societies all come to different conclusions on what's moral or not. I do think that, like, we should have the government out of that as much as possible. And I do think that that's where I agree with Big Papa Fascist in the promotion of certain lifestyles shouldn't be something that we accept. However, I completely disagree with him when he talks about how it's the role of the government to demonize them or to say that it should be illegal or something like that, because we should not be putting morality solely in the hands of the government like that.
Well, where do you derive your moral barometer from?
So I consider myself Christian in this sense, that I am Christ-like. I'm non-denominational. I'm not a student of Christianity or anything like that. I think Christ is the figure that I should try to emulate my life after. I fail at that every day.
So you don't derive your morals from the Bible necessarily.
Not necessarily. I derive it from the figure of Christ and trying to be Christ-like.
Okay, so from your perspective, then you are a moral relativist.
No, because there are certain things that I think objectively we could see are immoral and moral to everyone, and that we have to have objective truth, such as murder, rape, things like that, theft. But when it comes to kind of the ideas of what do we consider love to be, what do we consider healthy relationships to be, and what's morale, there's one thing to say we could look societally and say we think this type of relationship would ultimately lead to a better society if the bulk of the people were involved in this relationship. That's still not a question of morality, though.
That all sounds like moral relativism to me, Rob.
Okay, so you derive your morality strictly from the Bible?
Yeah.
Are you a literalist on the Bible?
For the most part.
So if I'm not a student of the Bible or anything like that, but if I could derive passages that recommend stoning for certain crimes, you would agree that that would be the prescription?
You would only be able to look at those passages through the prism of the Old Testament, Rob.
But so you would say anything that's prescribed in the New Testament that you would adhere to?
That anything that's prescribed by Jesus Christ, yes.
Okay, well, isn't that exactly what I said?
No.
So your relative is in
because
that you're
said that you would point out examples in the Old Testament of stonings.
Okay, so again, right, but you're saying that the only passages that you take as relevant are the teachings of Jesus Christ. Not all of the New Testament is particularly the words of Jesus Christ, correct?
Yeah, for the most part, the New Testament is For the most part, it is actually.
Well, but there's certainly things that are prescribed in there that are contradictory from passage to passage, right? That, like, for example, there are things that it's not strictly coming from the words of Jesus. Again, there are people that I'm sure that are watching right now that could cite passage and verse for questionable things that are in the New Testament as well.
But not you.
What's that?
But not you.
Because I don't claim to be someone who's a student of the Bible. I claim to look at the figure of Christ.
I'm just saying it sounds like moral. It just sounds like moral relativism to me.
It sounds like moral relativism on your part. It sounds that you're picking and choosing what parts that you think that you find applicable.
It can't be moral relativism if I'm telling you this is the exact prism. So my morals aren't going to change; they're going to stay the same.
So you don't believe in the Old Testament. You don't believe in any morality from the Old Testament, and you believe word for word the New Testament and all the prescriptions.
That's what the New Covenant is. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to get it on record now, and then other people can decide every word that's in the New Testament, whether it be what is immoral.
That's fine. This has been well known about me forever.
That's fine. I'm just getting on record. I didn't know that about you. That's fine.
Can I expand a little bit on my previous answer?
Sure.
There is actually a big thing that I've been advocating for people for a while, and that's going to more self-defense courses, going to schools. If there's a gun club or rifling clubs, I know in the South there's a lot more rifling clubs than in the North, joining those and learning about that. Self-defense is something that I'm a great and a huge supporter of. I remember having to go to meetings for trans people murdered in my community back in 2019 for the 2 trans people that were murdered. And for those instances, when it comes to hate crimes and motivated hate attacks against gay people, in those instances, the only cure for homophobia is a bullet.
Okay. All right. So from Mojo for Rob, where do you draw the line of the government getting too big, and how would he decrease LGBT programming in society?
Sorry, 1 second. I think that what we do is we stop promoting these things, particularly children and things like that. I think that that's a good first step. That's something that we should do. I'm screwing up here. Sorry. My channel's screwing up. So I think that that's different, right? That's a different conversation than whether or not we should actively be up here. We should actively be making things illegal, like gay marriage and things like that. I think that we need to maximize the idea that we have human freedom for consenting adults to do things like that. And we should make government as limited as possible unless there are actual horrible things that we can see as immediate consequence of these things, such as incest. The problem with incest, obviously, we can see is that people are victimized because of that familial relationship and things like that. Polygamy is a little more loose, but I'm also for making polygamy illegal just because of kind of what we've made marriage and what it represents as well. But I think that the way I draw the line is I say that we have as limited a government as possible when it comes to social issues, and we don't try to have the government legislate morality, because the problem is, as good as it sounds, what ends up happening is that you have governments that end up not being invested in the will of the people, as I think even BigPapaFascist would say. And so if we give them the sole power to dictate what is moral and make things legal or illegal based on that, we could see that it'll be devastating for society.
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap it up after that. Thank you guys both for coming on, all 3 of you guys for coming on. But that was fun. And we have the polls up in our community section on our YouTube page. If you guys haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. We have debates every night this week. We have one tomorrow night at 9 p.m. and it's going to be with Finley and Mio. God, I keep doing that. And they're going to be debating the nuclear family and traditional gender roles. Mrs. Papa Fascist will be here Sunday night at 9 p.m. debating witchcraft and feminism. So that'll be fun. And Big Papa Fascist will be back Saturday night debating race and gender at 9 p.m. Eastern. But yeah, if you are not in our Discord, go join that, because that's where you can find our scheduling. Same with our Twitter. Other than that, thank you guys all. So I guess we can close it down. If anybody has any final thoughts, nothing.
No,
we good?
The apology is fine. That's the real reason I came on, but I don't mind having these debates.
Okay. Well, you got one. And you're like the only person in the history of mankind.
I know you are. I've never heard him do it.
But when I'm wrong about something, I'm wrong about something.
I fully accept. I'm over it. I won't bring it up again. despite disagreements we have on this particular issue. I don't think that the disagreements we have on the issue.
But hey, Rob, hey, fuck this Dylan guy though.
I like Dylan. Dylan's one of my favorite streamers. I really like him.
Man, Rob, you talk so fast though.
Wait, fuck me? I thought you didn't like the gays.
It was a joke. It was a fucking joke.
I thought you didn't like the gays, and now you're fucking them. What the fuck?
Go grab that pair of tennis shoes, Dylan.
Anyways.